Alrighty. Well, welcome back, you guys. I'm sitting here with Cyprian today, back for another episode of These People Are Idiots. We are here following the Trump assassination. I think it's been, about 3 days since it's gone down?
About
Yeah. So, I guess to start, how have things been over in DC?
um, the full-time politics junkies that I know have been kind of not sleeping. It's the Trump assassination has really thrown them into kind of a bit of a tizzy. Uh, the de- the Democrats are now divided between those who are emotionally making their peace with the awareness that Trump's going to win and DC politics is probably going to be under a heck of a lot more scrutiny under a Republican administration, and those who are still clinging to self delusion that Trump's probably going to lose and that they don't have to deal with how they treated other people. So, I mean, and there's some basis for bitterness because just recently, the Republican Party in DC is being investigated for campaign finance fraud for assisting in an effort to recall one of the local council members.
Oh, shit.
So uh, there's a bit of bad blood.
How much are you seeing in terms of, just the laughing, the meanness, the callousness? Because I feel like I've gotten some really weird responses here in Oregon to where it's just full
It,
on support.
I'd say of the Democrats that I know, it's maybe 5% overt, I hope he dies. Uh, about maybe 15% tacit. Uh, I'm not going to treat an assassination attempt like a horrible thing. And then you've got maybe 60% okay, this is bad. This is gonna rebound on us. This is bad. We have to condemn this just for our own sakes. And the rest is genuine horror.
Yeah.
So there's at least enough Democrats who have some sense of humanity and enough Democrats who have some sense of self-preservation that they aren't going to do anything particularly stupid. But you're still dealing with about 20% who are either so bloodthirsty or so deluded that they think it's okay to uh, explicitly or tacitly endorse assassination attempts.
Yeah. That's good. The 60% is on the other spectrum. I think the 60% here, though, is kind of on the other side, and I might make it more like 80. People here are getting dark with this shit. Not everybody, but I got into it with a local bud tender because he heard I was gay, so off to the races we were about how the great Hitler's almost slain, and he just would not let me get a word in edgewise. Kept me in the dispensary for like 10, 15 minutes talking my ear off, and by the end of it, I had to tell him, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, sell me my goddamn weed. You're supporting a terrorist. An innocent woman got murdered. I told him very clearly, I was a part of Antifa. I wanted Donald Trump dead. This is not a good thing. You almost got a civil war. And, got into it in the middle of the dispensary with him, and then he just shut up and kept his mouth shut and sent me my shit. But it's weird to see it in the workplace, like with cashiers and shit like that. People are very yay.
That's, and I suppose that's an East Coast versus West Coast difference. There's been an effort to drag politics into the workplace on the East Coast. And it is very, very painful if you have a different opinion from whoever the local power brokers are. However, there's still a lot more reticence in talking about it. I get the impression that on the West Coast, it is routine to talk about politics at work. Uh, and for cashiers or clerks to talk about politics with customers. And that's just not something that routinely happens here. I mean, it's one thing to talk politics with a cabbie because cabbies are unofficial mediators and brokers in it, and they've got information. But with a waiter or with a store clerk, no, not a good idea.
Yeah, and honestly, I never even really. I think up until now, I love talking politics with my local clerks and my peoples and all that. But after that, I'm just like, I'm gonna just kind of stay tight-lipped and not bring up anything because I don't want to start something. I don't want to start a fight. I don't want to start an argument. I feel like we're walking on very thin ice right now, and I just kind of want to tread carefully because it's kind of starting to feel like the beginning of COVID again, where it's a really, really big disagreement if you disagree to where it can get really heated real fast. And I'm just trying to avoid that while also standing my peace and also using my voice and being the loudmouth motherfucker I am, but just trying to lessen that right now in a weird way.
Talking politics when there are people who don't have the patience to accept disagreement is a risky thing. And I get the impression that there's maybe a lot less patience for disagreement now than there was maybe a generation ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and here it's just because I mean I'm about as loudmouth in person as I am on camera. I'm not going to bite my tongue to fucking anybody. I don't give a fuck if I'm standing in front of you or not. But that's also a good way to kind of gauge the level of acceptability on time goes on with certain fronts. And with this whole Trump issue, I think it just leads to like a level of stupidity to where you've just completely checked out. I shouldn't be telling people 5 hours after a presidential assassination, hey, or attempt that, hey, there was a presidential assassination attempt. And then be like, what are you talking about? It's like you shouldn't. The information is getting to these people so fucking slow on so many fronts. It's just weird. It's been an emotional roller coaster the past few days for me. I think it's been up and down and up and down and up and down, and I've just been kind of riding with everybody else. I think.
When you talk about information getting slowly to them, do you mean in terms of they didn't find out what happened for several hours or a day later, or that they're just kind of slow as in they're not realizing the implications of that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Like, yeah, and the implication one especially pisses me off because I was in the room with people that were just laughing and acting like it was a big old happy grand thing, and in terms of like, oh, he lived, yeah, the savior, and I'm just like, okay, it's great that he lived, and I did have a brief little hurrah moment when he pumped his fist up, but for the most part, it's like people who sit here and tell me why do you get all hyped up over this Antifa shit? Why are you fixated on politics? Why are you fixated on the protests? Why are you so hooked up on your past? Because this is what I've been trying to warn people about on my channel. Guy like me could have been Thomas Crooks very, very fucking easily. And this is exactly what I've been telling people what was going to happen. It doesn't matter if he was associated with Antifa or not, which he doesn't seem to be. He was an angry, fearful, hateful kid that may have even got taken advantage of and used in a greater plan. But if we were to focus on the individual himself, it was a broken fucking kid who wanted to kill, just like me. So I have all these people that, at least in my head, I'm like thinking I thought they knew my story and I thought they knew what I was passionate about. And then when you try to like say something about it, it's just like, what are you talking about? And it's just like, I don't know. I don't have time for some of that anymore to where it's just, I blatantly told people to fuck off and they're fucking idiotic this week. Like, it's not anything new to me. But if you're going to support an act of terrorism in front of me, or if you're going to joke about a woman's life being taken away, or you're not going to realize how close we get to collect civil war, you're a fucking retard. and I want to show love and compassion. But I would be lying if I didn't say motherfuckers were testing me this week. The only thing that's been able to bring me down this week was making a Kanye West music video. I'm not a Kanye West fan. I just really, really liked that song, and I felt like it fit the moment. That was the only thing to get me out of it because everybody else's bullshit was just dragging me down. I don't know. Sorry to sound like a therapy session right now. It's just
I,
been so wild.
I mean, we live in crazy times. Just, just part of staying sane is being able to talk and gripe about how crazy things have gotten.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're probably handling it better than I did when during 2020, where I mean, I lived in a neighborhood in DC where there weren't cops in the 1990s, and seeing the defund the police movement did not exactly make me thrilled to go outside.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, my neighborhood was relatively quiet, but uh, there's been a definite uptick in murders in DC since defund the police. And this was entirely predictable. And I was in a towering rage after I encountered any sign for that. But local lefties are going to hop on whatever the latest cause of the week is with both feet. They're not going to ask questions, they're not going to express doubts, and the result is going to be ordinary people get hurt. And because they're so rich and insulated, they're not the people driving it aren't really going to find out until years later after the tragedy has become kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
And it's just there's cycles of this. The people who are on the bottom, who get some idea about what's going on and how things are failing, end up finding out well before a lot of the power brokers do. And the result is there's a heck of a lot of psychological tension between, for that time between when you encounter stuff you know is a bad idea and when it finally gets addressed by the general population. Years of pain, years of suffering, and if you just let that shut you up, things are going to get resolved even slower.
It's true. Yeah. I just I as upset as I'm being, I think it's mostly because I've been so to myself and I just need to get a lot of this off my chest. But like, let's focus on the good for a minute. Like, I feel like the good, I was not around post 9/11 in America. I mean, I was, but like, I was a little ass kid. I couldn't tell you what the political climate was like. This is probably the closest to my lifetime I will ever come to a greater sense of unity in America. I do feel like for all the bullshit and all the nastiness, there is a greater sense of coming together right now where people are backtracking, people are deleting old posts, people are making apologies, people are making up new past realities where they never said anything mean about Trump ever. And as stupid as that is, it's also kind of like that is a really, really, really good win. And in a way, it almost feels like an end of an era for me if I were to start with the Black Lives Matter rallies and the Antifa riots and move to the assassination attempt on Trump. It feels like that part of the book closed and now something else is beginning. I woke up the next day feeling like the air feels new, the light feels new, everything feels new. It feels like we're on a new path now and like we're starting chapter two.
The
I don't know.
it's it's no longer possible to deny that there are serious freaking problems. That closes a chapter on a period of secrecy and denial and opens a chapter of honesty.
Absolutely. Like, I think people want to be honest right now. Like, I mean, there's still a lot going on. I know you're more cautious with these things than I can be, but There's Secret Service agents coming out saying we think something was wrong. People in the crowd saying we think something was wrong. Police saying we think something was wrong. And it's like, this seems more than a teenage or young man coming in with a gun perched up on a building.
At the very least, somebody's tactics, techniques, and procedures were violated
Mm-hmm.
because that roof should have been secured.
You know what that building was, right?
That was supposed to be the staging area for the local police capability, and allegedly they had a counter sniper team in there.
From my understanding, it was the Tactical Operations Center for the Secret Service in general. That's what I was hearing.
I haven't heard that allegation yet, but okay.
I heard that one. I think that was redacted. Redacted's been doing pretty good at following a lot of this, I feel like. And then you have people now in the crowd that are saying we saw a shooter on the water tower. The police told us there's another shooter. You need to move. And so this is one thing that so come up that I've noticed. You got kid on the roof. The ballistics apparently say the shot was fired from like 480 yards away or something. There's like two spots that the bullet could have traveled from that distance: a water tower and a nearby gymnastics center that are placed at exactly the same distance away from each other. And then you have the building right in the middle. That's where I'm starting to get worried. Like, there was even an interview where she's like, yeah, we think there's a second shooter running around the woods right now.
And I can't rule that out, but it's also people all also tend to hallucinate under high levels of stress, and security organizations have to respond to the worst case scenario. So if there's a 1% chance there's a shooter, another shooter in another location, you have to react as if they were there.
Yeah.
So maybe that's true, maybe that's not. And that's the sort of thing that is going to take days to investigate properly. And at this point, it's just speculation and rumor, and maybe a few jokers making things up along the way. So stories are going to change dramatically, even in the best of situations. So I'm just waiting to get a more complete picture.
Yeah. And what I hear from you isn't dismissiveness. You're taking the cautious approach because A, you're actually in politics in DC, and your level's way smarter than me. You're being cautious with this. I'm definitely more the reactionary emotional type on this issue, I think, right now. So I appreciate the reservation, because at first I'm just like, damn, how's he gonna gaslight people like that? And then I think for a sec I'm like, no, we have to let the truth have its due. We don't know anything yet. What I think is positive, though, JFK, it took people years to start talking about shit like this. Trump, it took less than 24 hours for people to start noticing this type of shit. So I think if we do get something, or a series of somethings, it's going to be coming out pretty damn quick, which will be a nice thing.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Because Crooks' phone was in the control of the FBI. And yet, it took about a day to get any news about that phone.
Yeah. Oh, and no social media presence whatsoever.
Now, a teenager with no social media presence is kind of hard to believe, but he could have scrubbed it.
But wouldn't the FBI be able to find it? Because I feel like you can't just
Yes,
delete a Facebook.
It's one of those, either this kid was so much of a loner that he wasn't active on social media, which does happen, or he was really good at scrubbing it, which is also possible, or they just wanted to buy time in order to scrub it, so nothing embarrassing cropped up.
Yeah. Have you heard anything about the allegations that that there's some people in DC, I guess, trying to say that Iran tried to orchestrate the attempt? I haven't read too
I
much into
mean,
that. I've seen
that's where
surface
the
level.
wording is important. Now, does Iran want to assassinate Trump? Absolutely. Was Iran behind this? Probably not. Um, is it easy to deflect blame? Is it easy to deflect blame for Democratic politicians onto Iran? Yes. So was Iran behind this? Probably not. And the reason why some people are talking about Iran now is probably to deflect anger at Democratic rhetoric onto Iran, even though Iran probably had nothing to do with this assassination attempt.
I just feel like that's playing with fire. It's like we're already going to war with Iran. There's no backing out of that. Can we just stop pissing off these motherfuckers and bringing them into everything? It's you
Well,
can't
I mean,
just be go around blaming.
the interesting thing is that traditionally the Democrats have been much friendlier to Iran than Republicans. So to see Democratic leaning intelligence officials try to use Iran as a distraction kind of indicates that they value domestic politics more than trying to cozy up with Iran.
Yeah. The Biden administration, anyone under that group, they're not thinking peace right now. They're not thinking deals. They're not thinking unity. They're thinking there's going to be a war, and how can we use that war to our advantage in the meantime? Like,
And if you look at the US military, it's not ready for war. That Gaza pier was an utter fiasco.
well, I'm not saying the military itself is for war. Like I don't look at the military anymore like stormtroopers going across the planet and wanting to dominate. And even since the Hamas shit's popped off, I've lessened on the word imperial because it might be a little more hyperbolic than not. But I just think that we're in control of powerful men that are using innocent men and women in this country to go all over the planet, do shady shit, suck up resources, fuck people over, start shit, whether intentionally or not. And I don't mean that in terms of the individual. I mean it in terms of like just the events, botched missions. Just my entire life, it just seems like the military's here now. 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 The military's here. And it just starts to feel more like a world police than anything. Whereas now, when I'm seeing Donald Trump and I'm hearing things from Putin about him on the Ukraine war, talking about like, no, this is what we want. We want to sit down. We want to broker a peace deal. We want to figure this out. Like that's what at least people like me, kids of my generation, we've been wanting to hear. Because it's just like the more the military comes back to America and the less space it occupies all over the planet and the more we can focus on ourselves, that I feel like is what's going to make Americans feel truly safe. And that's not to say we can't be involved in different places, but we don't need to be in fucking Ukraine right now. You know? We don't need to. I just. And you got more of a military background than me, so you can give me some insight to this. This is stuff I am.
Okay, it's a bit more complicated.
Eh,
One of the main ways that you have a stable peace is by a series of alliances and backing up the people in that alliance. That's supposed to be that an attack on one becomes so unthinkable because of the massive response. However, that massive response has become much more questionable over the generations. In Ukraine, the pre-2014 government was aligned with Moscow, and let's remember Putin's Russia is a corrupt oligarchy. They were talking about managed democracy back in the 2000s. So a lot of what the complaints about the lack of real democracy in the West are, Putin was pioneering those techniques back in the 2000s. But Russia is a very corrupt and dysfunctional country that puts on a show of traditionalism and conservative values, but the actual behavior is a lot less sincere.
Yeah.
Ukraine was even poorer and arguably more corrupt than Russia until 2014. And whether it was a genuine revolution or a coup, that's debatable. But even back in 2005, when I visited Kiev, there was a stark divide between Western Ukrainians and Eastern Ukrainians. And understand that Ukrainian identity is as much political as it is the traditional markers of an ethnicity.
So,
There's
oh, sorry. No, I was just saying I wanted to break that down a little bit, the Western versus the Eastern, but it sounded like you're kind of going into that a little bit.
so the, there's very close common ancestry between Russians and Ukrainians, to the point of, are these really a different group? The language is almost identical. There's maybe an extra case in Ukrainian, a few different words, but that's like the difference between English and Scottish. There are a few differences there, but it's not a profound one.
Yeah.
The main driver of Ukrainian identity is a dissatisfaction with Russian culture as exhibited through Moscow. So people in Western Ukraine tended to adopt Catholicism or to adopt Catholic type practices and Western type thinking through the seminary in Kiev. In many respects, Ukrainian identity was kind of an outgrowth of a combination of localism, because people in a local area tend to always think of themselves as a little distinct from whoever the central government is, and ideological dissatisfaction with the Russian government in the imperial era and beyond. And now, so that effect was strongest in Western Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine was heavily dominated by those who are more loyal to Moscow and who consider themselves ethnic Russian. And the result was not just a supposed linguistic divide, although really the linguistic differences are minor, but an ideological divide. Those in Western Ukraine tend to orient more towards the West. Those in Eastern Ukraine tend to orient more towards Moscow. Of course, since 2014, a lot of the ordinary people in Eastern Ukraine now prefer the government in Kiev to the government in Moscow, but because of so much intimidation going on and the efforts of Russia to swallow those republics, that's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
it seems simplistic to present the breakaway republics as a simple land grab. And I mean, I think there were a couple of months in 2014 and 2015 in which it did look like it was a genuine demand for autonomy. And then Russia basically sent so many troops in that and yanked around the local separatists that it was just Russia trying to dominate the area again.
Yeah.
Which is not to say the Kiev government is all that nice. The Ukrainian mafia is very powerful, just like the Russian mafia. These are societies with profound organized crime problems on the level of being able to dictate prosecutors and having huge political influence. So the Kiev government isn't all that nice, warm, and cuddly. But there's an argument that they are less oppressive than the Russian government.
So, is Ukrainians ties to white supremacy? Because when you're saying that, I imagine it would have to be more on the western side, right? Am I correct in assuming
Yes.
that? So, is it kind of a situation kind of more similar to the United States, to where that type of thing? I think the best way to explain it, it's more rural and kind of, of course, it would get involved of much heavier extent, but I don't know. I think I want to try to understand the white supremacist angle more in Ukraine, because I remember prior to the invasion, really big in device, they were going over there with cameras all the fucking time, and it was, here's the Nazi rally, here's the gladiator match, here's hanging out with Nazis at the border with the AR-15, and then that just all kind of went away. And a lot of the war footage you see now comes with iron crosses and swastikas and tridents, because a lot of Azov runs the tank battalion groups. So I think I just kind of want to like understand a little bit more of that if you have.
It's messy,
Yeah.
very, very messy. So the communist government absolutely devastated Ukraine in the 1930s. So when Nazi Germany invaded, there were a lot of people who viewed Nazi Germany as liberators.
Hmm.
So they willingly joined the Nazis because the Nazis were going to kill them last rather than kill them first.
That makes so much goddamn sense.
So, so in a lot of those areas in the Baltic states and in Ukraine, German equipment was given to locals who sometimes formed their own armed groups allied with the Germans, or they were inducted into German military units. So for example, there's a cemetery to veterans of a uh, German military unit comprised of people from Estonia. Estonia or Latvia, I can't remember. And they're wearing the Stahl helm, and that's kind of shocking for people from outside the area. But to people in that area, they were just joining up to fight the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union had invaded them and killed a bunch of their people, and now the Germans were offering a chance to fight the Soviets. In Ukraine, it was even more stark. However, some of those Western Ukrainian militiamen were uh, were concentration camp guards. Some of them fought in SS units. Uh, they so the desire for safety and not being exterminated also pushed them to work towards the genocidal goals of the Soviet Union, of Nazi Germany. So that relief at not being dead caused them to adopt Nazi symbols and even to some extent Nazi ideology. And then when the Soviet Union took over, that was repressed. So for a lot of people on the ground, it was the lies of the Soviet government or the repressed holdouts of this ideology that looked really tough and powerful. I think I'll gravitate towards the really tough and powerful ideology that was suppressed and wait until the communists are gone. So many of the instincts that orient Americans towards democracy, the traditions, the freedom, the sense that there's a power to resist based on principles that are well applicable, and the tradition of my neighbor had been in the Navy for 20 years. He understands the legal system around it. He understands how to effectively navigate a bureaucracy peacefully. In America, that orients towards democracy, that community level connection. In Ukraine, a lot of that oriented towards dictatorial ideologies, either communist or Nazi. Now, there was a genuine democratic effort after the 1990s where people would say, that was actually bad. Let's walk back on that. This is an embarrassment. I realize that was that what a lot of people thought it was a shot at greatness and freedom, but no, this was a mistake. Let's walk back on it. So in 2014, you see a tension between right sector and what Americans would call neo-Nazis. Somehow there was a truce brokered between them. I don't understand it. And there are various allegations one way or the other. But by pointing the neo-Nazis against Russian forces, it made the Kiev government a heck of a lot more stable internally. And because there was far less attention towards those neo-Nazi elements in the security services, they were more able to get Western support. Now, Russia is in many ways the same way, except instead of being a matter of having neighborhood level connections, the Nazis get perceived in Russia as professional because Soviet bureaucracy was a mess. And the Nazis, even though they were trying to kill and exterminate Russians, were seen as actually competent. So they associated Nazi ideology with competence.
That's so fucking horrifying.
So you will see, and you did see, Russians from Russia favorable towards neo-Nazi movements.
I always kind of wondered about that. Like, I don't think it was Wagner. It might not have been Wagner. I think there was another one that was like popping off there from it in the media. Clearly, it wasn't important enough to remember.
Allegedly, several people in Wagner had neo-Nazi symbols on them.
Oh, okay. So
which is entirely believable. I mean, there's allegations about is this photo really of this person or not.
Mm-hmm.
But there are Russian people who adopt Nazi symbols because they see it as a symbol of power and competence, not necessarily because they're in favor of exterminating Russians.
Yeah.
I mean, modern neo-Nazi ideology is a grab bag of fun with symbols, racial hate, and general stupidity. And you are going to get that mess in America and that mess in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. And I could totally see that too, and seeing different levels. Like there's, let's be real, there's neo-Nazis in this country that are like barely dedicated to the cause at all. Like they grew up with it, they hear it, they think they're about it, but they're not really. And then you have the hardcore motherfuckers that are really, really about it. And there really is kind of different levels, because the ones who aren't really about it, that are kind of lower level, they're more into it for the mysticism, the aliens, the occult aspect behind Hitler, the Ouija boards, that type of shit. And then you get higher level and it's like, no, that's silly childish shit. We don't really give a fuck about that for the most part. Unless you go to certain groups like Order of the Nine Angles, which is a satanic Nazi group based out of Europe, which is fucking wild. But yeah, no, it's, I don't know. Just think every country has this problem. I wouldn't be shocked to hear if Africa had a Nazi problem. Well, I mean, I know they do.
There's a politician in Namibia named Adolf Hitler, and he's black.
I was going to say, please tell me he's black. Like, I know the whole thing in South Africa, there's the whites that are freaking out about a race war and they go and train out in the country, but that's some next level shit.
Well, Namibia is not much better, but his parents were trying to think of a name of a powerful political leader, and they figured, hey, Adolf Hitler, a guy who was barely constrained by a world war, seems like a powerful political leader. Let's name our kid that.
It's only funny because it's so not funny. It's just...
I mean, a lot of people, wow, and that's true of older generations as well, don't understand the the degree to which Hitler abused innocent people, they just think of a powerful political leader. They think of Nazism as a powerful military, uh, a powerful planned economy. They're not thinking of it was a corrupt, dysfunctional mess. They don't think about innocent people getting hurt. They don't think about the scientific fraud in Nazi Germany. They don't think about the Holocaust or the way the Holocaust was caused by the incompetence of the Nazi government in finding a better alternative. They just think, ooh, powerful tanks, wars, invasions, happy people in photographs.
And what makes that different from most Americans on a lot of different situations right now? What makes that different from Americans with gender care, with COVID, with the Trump assassination? Like,
When I tried rereading the Nazi Doctors because of some stuff in the trans healthcare for trans kids claims, I mean it's very hard to just. I get very emotional reading about the excuses offered because they are so goddamn similar to the current ones.
hmm. Like there's no difference, like whatsoever at all. And like the reoccurrence of we're just following the rules, we're just following orders, and then when it turns out they didn't, I just
The,
it's
the,
fucking witchcraft is what this is in the
the,
modern day.
Nazi Germany was, in many respects, built on scientific fraud
Mhm.
about economics and about biology. Modern America is, in many respects, built, or at least the modern American left is built on scientific fraud about economics, like modern monetary theory, and biology. I am not exactly thrilled.
Yeah. I mean, what's I mean, like if you look at the gender ideologues, the way they talk about like people now, it's like people are a thing. Like the male brain, the woman brain, the cis brain, the way they talk about brains really starts to get me because
The,
there
the,
was the
not,
Jewish brain and the black brain.
the Nazis talked about der Jude, the Jew, the Aryan, the Slav,
The
and now we're
cis,
seeing
the
the
straights.
cis.
It pisses me off. And they don't realize how they sound when they're doing it. Because, like I said, I still get it just because I'm gay. And the other day, what started the Trump discussion was this. And then that led into me trying to talk about my husband because mentioning it because of the Trump thing and being like, yeah, you don't get to pull the I'm gay card. I have drag friends on me. I'm a gay man. Let me tell you what I think. Dude, I'm blacking this out. I'm tired of being associated with this shit. Like, for real. I don't even know where we start on this. It's just been such a whirlwind, dude.
I think we were getting
Nazi
into
doctors.
neo-Nazis in Ukraine and Russia, and then kind of had a bit of a parallel into pseudoscience and Nazism, and then pseudoscience in America, and then how people think that everybody in a certain category is the same, and
Yeah, the
the
brain
nasty
effect.
effects of it.
Yeah. I think the nasty effect of it is I'm starting to go fucking insane. But and it's just like I said, if we seize this moment, if we can focus on the good and all agreeing that what just happened was bad with the people who can agree it was bad. I mean, the one thing that I left with the dispensary that felt really good that day is making him shut his goddamn mouth, put his head down, and do his job because he knew he said something fucking stupid. We gotta stand strong in that conviction. Like, people need to call it out when they hear it. If people are supporting terrorists, they're supporting terrorists. Thomas Crooks, even though he, in a really fucked up kind of way, has my sympathies, and I see him as a victim of the climate that people like me help create, he's still a fucking terrorist. It doesn't change anything. But people really, really, really need to be humbled right now. And people need, like, don't let it get the best of you, but I think people need to let their emotions show right now. and people need to not be afraid to be angry or to cry or to say their piece, because like I'm so goddamn tired of people coming up to me and talking in whispers and making sure no one's hearing them because, oh, someone's going to disagree with this, or, oh, I don't want to get in trouble for saying this. I'm so tired of those conversations. I'm so tired of the whispering. I'm so tired of the pussyfooting. Like, people need to grow some fucking balls. Trump had balls. That was balls. What we saw was pretty damn cool. I would have fucking run like a bitch. Like, I ain't even gonna lie. Like, for all the brutal shit that I put on this fucking channel, I would have run like a puss and got the hell out of there. And that man's just like, let's go. That was cool. And we need to appreciate that. Like, really. Never thought I'd celebrate Trump surviving an assassination attempt in 2024. But I mean, it's a good thing that the man didn't die. And it's a tragedy that somebody else died. I think, are we up to 2 people now? Did the,
Um, Corey, and I can't pronounce his last name right, Compatore or something. The firefighter was the first guy reported killed. Then we got the name of the shooter, and I don't know if someone else ended up dying as well. Allegedly, there was someone who was also gravely injured.
yeah. You know how long the shooter was there? And I,
There's allegations he was on the roof for about 28 minutes.
oh, you're here in 28. I was here in 26. But yeah, that's that's not good. And from what I understand, the Secret Service rule is you have to be authorized by the head of the Secret Service or the person in charge, or the person has to take a shot at the president first. Apparently, that's the current rules.
That does not make any freaking sense.
I think it was
That
changed
does
in
not
recent
sound like
years.
that doesn't sound like the procedures I've heard about in the past. And I can understand maybe having to call it up to the local commander, because there was an incident a few years ago where a Secret Service sniper team did not was not aware that a police sniper team was meant to be in position, so they nearly shot the police sniper team.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought with it too. It's like that's the only thing that can make a rule sense is there would be an operation going on that you don't need to know about or don't know about, and you need to make sure you don't interfere with that operation. But in this case, it's like, was there an operation you weren't supposed to interfere with? It's very, and I mean, you look at, there's a lot of people that are making jokes about it right now, but they really did put DEI into the Secret Service. Those
Oh,
women would
God.
not have been there. And I'm not saying don't put women in Secret Service. I'm saying I could have taken those bitches.
I mean, look, you need females in a security organization if for no other reason than to be able to question and handle female detainees better. Because when a male cop searches a female detainee, things are going to get problematic one way
Yeah.
or another. So having females is a good thing. But trying to make the force 30% female and putting guns in the hands of people who are clearly not trained to be able to use them is very, very bad.
Yeah. This this should prove more than anything that DEI is not the fucking goal, and if anything, it's sabotage, whether it's intentional or not. It is actively sabotaging this goddamn country. Like,
I
we
mean,
can't manage races.
in
Or
this case,
gender.
it was on the basis of sex, not race. But that
Yeah, or
woman,
gender. But
that woman could not holster her weapon properly in a crowd control environment. She's lucky she didn't kill anybody.
she had a
And
dick,
she
she'd have
could have
shot it off.
trained to handle that at the range. What the heck is going on with her?
like, because I know, like, again, I'm more conspiratorial. You're more incompetence. I feel like they're both so equally.
I
They're
mean,
both
there
equal
is
options right now.
there's an argument that Trump's security detail was sabotaged by stripping the competent people from it and putting the incompetent people on it.
Well, they tried to strip him of his security detail after the felony thing. They didn't want him to even have Secret Service anymore.
At the legislative level, yeah.
Yeah, I really do feel like this was a coordinated effort to get Trump. I think everything ran out. I've been listening to people say it for months and months, and it's like just desperation. Like, because I think a lot of people are going to get held accountable. I think that the gender clinics are going to get shut down. I think aid to Ukraine is going to dry up. I think there's going to be a lot of investigations into groups like Antifa, like Black Lives Matter, into a lot of these queer Marxist groups, as there should be, and I will fully support, because there do need to be investigations. But that's a lot of money. That's a lot of people who are going to go to jail. That's a lot of people who are going to be exposed. Lord knows Trump will probably do more with the Epstein list than even RFK. You know, I love RFK, but I they're not trying to take him out like this. Now they've done a lot of shady shit. They've taken away his some of his Secret Service detail. I think they've given him less
He didn't
to do
have one
with.
until very recently.
Isn't it personal? Does he have a personal security detail?
He pays for his own.
To be fair, you probably should pay for your own if you're a Kennedy.
Uh, yeah. But Kennedy does not get along with most of his family.
I can understand why. I feel like he'd be the crazy uncle coming through. It's just like, for all the things he does take seriously, like, I feel like he opened my eyes up to a lot about vaccines that I was really hesitant about before, and I'm just like, okay, this actually, not everything, but there's some things where I'm just like, okay, that's some things I hadn't considered, and there might at least be something to this. But I think where RFK lost me kind of was whenever he was getting asked about the whole situation with puberty blockers and trans kids, and he was just basically like, "Oh, I'm put it on the parents. It's on the parents," and I'm just sitting here like, "The fuck it is." Like, if you knew, because it just kind of showed me he wasn't paying attention to that side of the story, which was a very important area of focus for me that
Which
would dictate
ironically
my vote.
ties in with a lot of his central political arguments that the pharma industry uh, was getting away with shady stuff because of their political ties. So
Yeah, which is why I expected him to be full force. You know.
it's also, if he's trying to play nice with the Democratic Party, um, he can't hit on the trans issue too much because a lot of the powerful brokers within the Democratic Party are all in on trans.
All that shows
So,
me at that point is he's culpable on that issue. Like, he's playing into
or
it at
he's
that
trying
point.
to, or he's trying to have a political effect without being too much of a threat, so he and his supporters get destroyed. Remember, the Human Rights Campaign, I mean, I assume you know about them.
Yeah.
They
I
are
mean, very little, but yeah.
incredibly powerful in Democratic Party politics, at least at the national level. And Kennedy is trying to play at the national level. So if he turns them from mildly opposed to strongly opposed, he can expect to see his donors getting leaned upon. He can expect to see people refuse to run his ads. He can expect to see some of his supporters getting harassed. So he's got to make sure that he doesn't piss off the major power brokers within the Democratic Party if he's going to be a Democrat.
Well, and see, that's another thing too, is like, because he went from being a Democrat to an independent, and part of me is like, are the Democrats just trying to sneak into the independent parties, and they thought it was going that way, and they wanted to send somebody in to grab that so nobody else could?
Independent is not a party. There
Well,
are independent parties, but just being labeled independent doesn't mean you're one of them. At least in DC, most people who are labeled independent are actually just Democrats who just don't want to bother with the Democratic Party machine politics.
Right. What I mean like that is just like sending someone from higher up and just positioning them, making them seeming like they're a part of this group when really they're still in full control of the Democratic Party, and just trying to go. I don't know. There's just that's how little trust I have in the Democratic Party. Is even someone like RFK, who I really love, I'm looking at and I'm being like, but can I trust you? Like Bernie Sanders, I loved him, but I got fucked. We all got fucked on Bernie.
Well, here's the thing: there was a deal cut with Bernie Sanders to keep him, to get his support for Hillary Clinton and to keep him within the party. RFK didn't take that deal.
Okay.
RFK tried to, my view is that RFK tried to save the soul of the Democratic Party by running against the Clinton machine. And he lost. And rather than to simply say, I lost, I'm going to let them do whatever, he decided to run as an independent to save the soul of the Democratic Party. That's going to mean tanking the election for the Democrats this time around, but a political party doesn't really self-evaluate until after they've lost an election. So by forcing the Democrats to lose an election this time around, he's speeding up the reevaluation process that might make them a better political party in the future.
I like that.
Huh. And if Biden dies, there's a non-trivial chance that almost all Democratic voters would flip to him rather than sometimes vote for Trump or vote for Kamala Harris or whoever. So he still has a, frankly, very low chance of getting elected president, but it's not impossible.
And I'm not trying to sound too critical of them. I guess I'm trying to like pick apart responsibly for the sake of being on a public platform, because if you hear me behind the scenes, I'm like rah RFK, listening to his speeches, listening to him go down to the border, like I really like him. I just want to be cautious.
He's a politician who genuinely cares. I strongly disagree with him on many issues, but he's actually sincere and he's trying to get information.
Yeah. And I believe he cares 100%. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I wasn't even going to vote Trump whenever RFK came around. Whenever it was RFK, I was just like, this is the guy. We're going to get away from Trump and Biden both at the same time. And he hasn't really done anything to lose me other than just kind of being disappointed on the whole trans issue. That's more of I mean, it's definitely a big deciding factor of my vote. Trump's clearly going to be the only one who does something about it. But I guess it's nice that we do have RFK and Trump at the same time against Biden.
I think most of the reason why Trump is so popular and why there's RFK is because the Democratic Party has imploded in terms of intellectual capability. They've become so repressive internally. They've made it so hard to have a genuine disagreement over facts or values within the Democratic Party that it's pushed people out. You had plenty of people joining the Republican Party now who aren't really in agreement with traditional conservative ideals or ideas, but they're doing it because it's a refuge from the madness that has taken over the Democratic Party. RFK is trying to provide that refuge, that alternative, that way to fix the Democratic Party, but as an avowed Democrat.
I guess I can feel that. I mean, different kind of way. Kind of like I want my YouTube channel to be a refuge for a certain type of person, somewhere for them to go if they're angry and to catch them so that they don't get sucked up into some other bullshit. I can respect that. Like, because that is a big thing. It's like people are going to go somewhere. It's like how I'm feeling with a lot of these shooters and these radical kids. How I always say it's not going to be lone shooters in the near future. It's going to turn into groups and cells and all that shit. You want to get responsible people catching those kids before anything like that possibly happens. So, oh, I guess it's good that there's people out there like that trying to figure that shit out because RFK is an inspirational man. Like he's done a lot. He's kept himself in great shape. He is very intellectual, even with the raspy voice. He is fucking like I listen to him and people talk shit about his voice all the time, and I'm like, okay, but are you
Well,
listening to the words?
he he knows his voice is hard for people to follow. He knows it sounds weird to a lot of people, but he still speaks. Good on him.
Mean, it's not even that hard of a thing to get past. It's just I guess I'm more of the substance of the issues because I'm like, okay, but while you've been sitting here making fun of his voice, did you hear a goddamn thing he just said about the border? Well, no, I just and it's like the surface level stupidity in this country. Everything has to be a meme, everything has to be a fucking joke, and it's like
I
people
mean,
can't take Trump seriously because he's orange and he talks funny. For some people that's really all it boils down to.
I get the impression so many people retreat into making a joke of things because they realize they don't have the knowledge or or intelligence to evaluate the thing itself.
Basically, if they can make you laugh, then you won't have to think too hard about the fact they can't answer the question.
I'm not saying I was taught that day one in the military, but at least a month or two in the whole if you don't know what's going on, make a joke and people will act as if you've answered the question.
I mean, shit, I do that at work all the fucking time.
But what happens when that dominates the political discourse? You've got a problem.
Real bad problem. So, did you hear about? Uh, I know that a man pulled a knife and got shot at the RNC, but feel like I heard something about an AR-15 too shortly after, or was that the same incident? Do you know about that?
I have no idea. Um, Allegedly, a homeless guy pulled a knife and was shot by police. I don't know what happened in that incident. I know a bunch of uh, quote anti-fascist Twitter accounts ended up broadcasting that very heavily over the past day.
Oh, hold up,
So maybe
Zach, you're
it's a
breaking
real
up a little
incident.
bit. What did they
Maybe
broadcast?
either the coverage seems wildly disproportionate and as if it's calculated to draw attention from the RNC event.
Okay, here, one moment. You just cut out a little bit here. Um,
Alrighty.
I just want to make sure I heard you right because it just glitched for a second. You're saying that Antifa was putting out the story as a way to deflect from the RNC event. Did I hear that right?
That's my best guess. To
Okay.
associate the RNC with uh, vulnerable people being hurt.
Well, I know they had some political groups on the ground. I was watching a live stream with the Marine rapper during the RNC event, and they were sending these little queer kids to talk about how the RNC and their hatred had no place in the community and how it encourages stuff like this. And then I think one of the newscasters said something along the lines of, "What about the story about or the allegations that he had a knife or da da da? All I care about is that someone innocent was shot." Something along those lines. You know, it's just that is one of Antifa's moves is they get the little activists and then they'll just kind of send them out to the cameras. Because there was times where I was out there and I was like, I want to talk to the cameras. I got some shit to say right now, and I'm clearly the most powerful voice out of whatever group I happen to find myself around at the time. They would always find the kids that were meek and soft spoken and kind of squirrely, but also with a little bit of attitude and spice in their voice. Those were the ones that went to the cameras. Never the people that actually had anything to do with like getting in conflicts with the police. So I know it's a tactic. But then sometimes it's also just kids running up wanting to feel important and feeling like they have something to say and just going and trying to do the right thing, but inadvertently causing more chaos.
And it's interesting to see that from the ground level perspective because there's a higher level, the media amplification level. And that's where, okay, you've got an independent journalist recording stuff, and then you have professional journalists just copying that, rebroadcasting that, make turning an incident that might get maybe 1% response or support into something that has 50% response.
Yeah, I mean that's something like groups here, like the Eugene Weekly, would do because you'd have a lot of like the Antifa reporters that would go out. They would like wear the helmets and they'd write reporter on the side, and then they might have a GoPro and do all that. They would just go back and meet up with the Eugene Weekly after that, and they'd just pass off the footage. You wouldn't have real journalists getting out in the middle of the riots. That's why, if you're to look up anything for Eugene riots and protests, there's actually very little unless you go to very specific websites and conservative outlets because there was just no people there.
And I I think people did that in the DC area, but they tried to be a little more actually separate and post it online independently, and then it was rebroadcast by regular journalists. Probably because there was a lot more monitoring of independent journalists when people are trying to get close to politicians.
Yeah, here it's more buddy buddy, like, oh, I'm calling my friend from this outlet or the Eugene Weekly. There was literally a time out there where like, get your friend on the phone, get her out here. And she was the one who I thought I was going to be talking to. I think we were sitting outside the federal courthouse and someone from the Eugene Weekly pulls up. And then that's the instance where they sent the little girl out there that I'd been talking to for 30, 40 minutes, had no clue about fucking anything. And I just remember sitting there like, because this was after Antifa was fracturing, so I was kind of going down by group to kind of see which tribe I belonged to, so to say, which was probably about a span of 4 to 5 weeks because I realized they were just all fucking batshit retarded. But yeah, I mean, they go to bars together afterwards. They play video games together. They're gonna go do drugs after the protest together. Like, you only
Okay,
got a couple thousand people here.
okay, that does describe a few journalists, a few mainstream journalists, and certain activists that I know of.
Like, it's definitely a culture that's saying it's a big club and you ain't in it. Like, there's been times like I've reached out to journalists, like in the beginning of this shit. I just kind of stopped reaching out to journalists. I'm going to start reaching out to some conservative news outlets for sure. But I've largely been sticking with podcasters because you talk to local news, they are so goddamn condescending. They will like talk shit. They'll be like, what information do you have? Shit like that, where it's just like, what little girl is on the other side of this email right now sassing off to me, and where's the adult I can talk to? Is kind of how it feels.
Journalism and education students have some of the lowest standardized test scores of college applicants.
God, you should have to have such high standards to go into journalism.
I mean, very few people are willing to take the pay if they aren't dumber than a box of rocks or spoiled rich kids.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It really is always spoiled rich kids. This isn't an instance where you have a middle-aged woman popping up. You don't have some 50-year-old, 60-year-old man that's been on the scenes for years. He's been there for the LA riots, and now he's going to be there through this. God damn it! That's fucking kids. And the one old guy I saw got arrested by the police.
And there's been a generation change in a lot of fields. So older journalists, I mean, yeah, they wrote and they hobnobbed with important people, but fundamentally they got into it for the pay. And maybe there was a good emotional thing of, yeah, I'm making the world better by putting a spotlight on stuff. But fundamentally, it was kind of a blue collar thing. They depended on their journalistic career for their income, and they were ordinary guys from ordinary backgrounds doing this stuff. And that was 25 years ago. And I think a lot of them They had their biases, but they generally tended to do okay. They aren't the morons we see now. Over the past, uh, by 2010, it was known that a lot of journalists were either uh, idiots, affiliated with some political cause or another, or just taking money on the side to supplement their income, or stupid rich kids. And that's just gotten worse over the years. And a lot of them are lazy. So quite often you have one journalist in a group of people who writes the story and then they all change it a little and they submit it. So it's not just that you have a wire service that is writing a story and then the newspapers copy it. The journalists get into a group where one of them writes the story and the rest of them copy it. They're lazy.
Well, and like over the course of COVID, half of them aren't even meeting, at least in the West Coast, they're not even really meeting in a room or anything. Everyone lives on their phones. They can go and live life and be journalists on their phones. You can do CapCut on your phone. You can write your shit on your phone. You can get AI on your phone. So these journalists are literally just glued to their devil boxes 24 hours a day, camera pointed up, data going out, and they're having conversations with anybody.
And that's one reason why there's a resurgence of citizen journalists, of people who have a day job and then they report stuff. So there's a guy in the DC area who basically listens to the police radio and reports on various incidents before the regular journalists do, if they do. So, sometimes it's very useful to people, like gang incident occurring at this location. Some of the locals will say, okay, I'm going to avoid that location for the next hour.
Intellectual vigilantes, I feel like, is a good way to put that. I have someone that reached out to me recently who's in Minneapolis, and ever since the riots, they have been formulating like every little thing that they feel like was sabotaged or went wrong during the riots and the incidents. And I'm just sitting here like they're like, oh, these probably thinking like this guy's gonna think I'm crazy or whatever. And I'm just like, this is fucking beautiful. You've been doing this for the last 4 or 5 years, like by yourself. This is cool.
I saw that page. Thank you for showing it to me.
Oh, I forgot I said that too. Yeah.
It's one thing to see that. I could kind of figure out some of it. I assume that whoever the commanding general of the of the Minnesota Guard was, they wanted orders in writing just to cover their own ass. Constitutionally, a verbal order would have been enough, but I think, given the political environment, he wanted to cover himself, because it's very easy to throw the National Guard under the bus if something goes wrong. I also suspect whoever that political aide was, and I can't remember his name, was maybe an idiot, and he wasn't necessarily conveying the incidents in detail. Which, if people are stressed, that's one thing, but that's why people have to regurgitate exact wording and references to specific authority. And you're trained to be able to say, under General X's orders, we are doing this, or we are requesting in the military. That way of talking about lines of authority in a regular environment serves you well when you are stressed and people need information, so you can regurgitate the proper authority for the legal environment. Civilians aren't necessarily trained to do that. So you had the governor, who was used to the military style of emergency response, given what he thought was a sufficient level of instruction to a guy who may not have had any military background and who therefore did not understand the full grant of authority in what the governor was saying.
I'm gonna be having this person, I think, on here in the next 2 weeks or so. Do you want to sit down and talk with them with me?
Oh, sure.
Because you clearly know way more about this shit than I do. Like, it's been a few weeks since I've read it, but I want to be able to sit down, go through it thoroughly. I know she's really excited to get into it. She's got some plans that she's wanting to get into. I think it's worth discussing, especially while people's ears are really open right now. It really is the big question that we all have to figure out about our own cities, our states, our jobs. Are we dealing with sabotage or are we dealing with incompetency? Or are we dealing with both? But we're certainly not dealing with neither. And I think everybody just wants to figure that out for where they live, be it in fucking Texas or DC or Oregon or even Canada or the UK. I think that's a question everybody has right now and everybody wants fucking answered. Is it conspiracy or is it stupidity? Or is it just confusion? Or I think everybody just wants answers right now.
And you know me, I'm an incompetency theorist. There is a staggering level of incompetence going on. And yeah, I mean, you'd think that the Secret Service, which is supposed to train with guns on a routine basis, would have people who know how to holster their weapon. But what did we see?
Not that. And that just scares you for everything else too. You're like, shit, they were supposed to be the one group. The one group you could never get through in this country.
And here's the thing, that is an easy thing to track. That is something that is easy to inspect and to verify. And if they're that bad on things that are easy to verify, how bad are they with the stuff that is hard to verify?
So it's like, what else has gotten through people that they don't know about? Like, what's been bugged? What's been hacked? Who's walked past you when you were pissing in the alley and you weren't listening for somebody's footsteps? Like, what's going on? Like, is that why cocaine is showing up in the White House? Because you didn't see the dealer knocking on the fucking door?
I mean, or it could have been just a VIP who said, "Oh, are they going to pat me down? If they pat me down, maybe they'll find it. I got to stash this somewhere."
And honestly, that's one theory that I haven't even heard of, and I've done that a million times in my own life where I've ditched a bag of Coke or alcohol or weed or something. So it's like, oh yeah, no, that actually, yeah. Someone probably freaked out and just walked away.
I mean, once they stash it in a public area, it's, I mean, yeah, you've got cameras, but if they're sly about it, you don't necessarily know who did it. So I'm actually kind of forgiving of the Secret Service for that part.
Oh yeah, I'm not faulting them too much. I mostly just want to make fun.
Yeah. But not securing that roof is.
Especially not, and like Secret Service, the police too. The man, I saw a cop and he's looking up at the roof and he's just slowly walking around like he's looking for his kid's football that just got lost. It's like, you have a gun, you at least have a voice. That cop is one that I really have a hard time. I have a difficult time figuring out whether it's stupidity or intentional. Because some of those people, I'm like, were you really just?
I mean,
no one looks around that hard and does nothing.
There's a possibility that the cop thought, hey, maybe this guy just wanted a closer look, a higher vantage point. He wasn't there to hurt anybody. He just didn't want to be in the crowd and wanted a good view.
Yeah.
And I've been at political events where I just climbed on top of something to sit down and have a better view than just standing in the crowd.
And it was hard to see the gun from the ground.
Right.
To be fair. So
that is a possibility. But, okay, once the gun was pointed at the cop, then you end up with a problem where that should result in an immediate response.
Yeah. Like, and I mean, I get it. It sucks citizens can't come armed to these events, but how could you if shit like this is going on? Because I feel like anyone in that crowd would have taken out that shooter in a heartbeat. If they saw a gun point at the president, half those rednecks would have just been like, "My day to shine, let's go," and they wouldn't have hesitated. But again, that's
And
not realistic for that environment.
and you also have a situation where you can have misidentification, or some guy accidentally points their gun in the wrong direction and everybody else overreacts.
There's a shooter over here. There's a shooter over there. There's a shooter over there. Everybody just, yeah.
No, I mean, it would be nice, but because people make mistakes, somebody else is going to have to take control, and you hope they're competent. In this case, they weren't.
I think the Texan in me just wants everybody to have guns. From straight out the womb, you get a gun. Teacher responsibility.
Uh, I mean, I've seen plenty of people act like an idiot in the army, but when they have ammo, they become a heck of a lot more careful.
Yep. Like like people like to talk shit about Texans and the rednecks and everybody down there. Oh, they're all gun toting. There must be gun violence out the ass. No, we're actually stopping shooters all the time, and the cops will come on TV and thank us for it when it happens and tell citizens, please continue to do this. And yeah, there's dumbasses and there's stupid shit that happens, but yeah, guns teach you a sense of responsibility. And a lot of people down there are more responsible than people in, say, places like Oregon, where there are little to no guns.
Or DC, where there's a lot of crime committed with guns, but there's not a lot of ability to respond to that by law-abiding people with guns.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a woman. Can she keep her pistol in her purse? No, she has to have it in a holder on her. Well, guess what? Women's clothing doesn't have quite the same convenience of men's clothing. That poses a few problems for women. Or if you're living in a high crime neighborhood and you want to stay safe, you have to go through the hellish bureaucracy set up by the local police department, because the local politicians are scared of guns. So if you're a law-abiding citizen living in a high crime neighborhood, what protection do you have? Your phone. Oh, by the way, 911 call responses are about 65% response after 15 seconds. So about a third of calls don't get a response.
And again, reminder for my audience who may not have heard it the other day. Other night, my neighborhood, white supremacist, AR-15, patrolling the neighborhood. Neighbor calls the police. Until they start firing shots or act violent, we can't do anything or send anybody out. Not even wake up the cops in our neighborhood. So, let's really ask ourselves how much we want to restrict these goddamn things. Like, really. I mean, I do agree with Texas' approach. Open carry, just go out and buy them as long as you live. That's the approach to me. I used to be anti that whenever I left, but now that I've spent enough time away, I'm like, no. Yeah, as soon as I get down there, I'm going to make myself a little armory, and it's going to be fun.
Well, there's also a bit of a class divide in DC with guns. So ordinary people, so criminals get guns. Ordinary people don't get guns. Security details for people like Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor get guns. Ordinary people, when they're carjacked, get killed, or at least if they're lucky, just yanked out of the car. Federal agents, when they're being carjacked, can shoot the carjacker.
What a nice little system.
I mean, one of the few Republicans in D.C. who was on the Board of Elections, he left, but about 2 years later, he was shot in the head during a carjacking. And that guy killed another 3 or so other people in the next day or so.
Then probably got released on little to no bail, I imagine.
He got shot he got shot by police in Maryland.
Like, we're not dealing with your ass. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the stories that are happening here. Like, you want to rape someone, come to Oregon. That's kind of what it is. You can rape and murder and stab, and like everyone's just like they can't get help. They can't get help at the hospital. They can't get help with the fucking police, and it's like you can't respond. I don't give a fuck what I can and can't respond to. I'll respond to whatever the hell I need to in my own goddamn home. Like the people here have been put in a really, really fucked up position. It's like it protects the criminals and it persecutes the victims. That's the system that's being created here. Like, if I were to break someone's legs for coming through my door or shoot them for coming in and threatening me and my family, I could go to prison. I could get sued. I could lose my gun. For what? I was playing Mario Brothers. like, don't give me that shit, Oregon. Fuck that. It's not common sense. And again, like I was so angry with Texas as a kid, and I thought they were backwards and rednecks, and they were racist, and they were all gun toting, and they didn't have it figured out, and they all believed in a magical man in the sky. Then why are they all respectful? At this current moment, they're the most respectful. They all have jobs. They have the best fucking families. They're some of the most responsible and clean people living in the cleanest fucking communities. Yeah, shit's not fucking perfect. The people here are further from perfect, so they don't really get to bitch too hard because there's a different level of sin here. And I think sin is a very good word for it.
I mean, some of the stories you've told me are shocking to me. And I lived in a high crime neighborhood in DC in the 1990s. I saw dime bags on the sidewalk outside of my apartment building, broken liquor bottles, used needles. I saw a shell casing every month or so. I only saw the cops in hot pursuit. And some of the stories you told shocked me.
Like, and like, if I really got to give myself, like, I feel like a reality check sometimes because, like I said, when I talk on the podcast and I list it out, it's just like, what the fuck? Because I like sit down and think in my head, I'm like, it can't be that crazy. You know, kind of like whenever I talk about how I like reconnected with my dad a couple months back after years of not talking to him, and I was just like, I'm sober now. I have to know, was it that bad? Turns out it was that bad and more. It's like, I want to be making this shit up. I want to be so mentally unwell and fried from all the years and drugs that all of this is an illusion and I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. I want to be a raging fucking tweaker right now that drank too much acid one day and never came back out, and this is just the reality I'm living in. But it's just kind of like, no, this is real. This is true. This is happening. These people are behaving like this. My town is going down like this. The country is going down like this. It just feels like so much all the time that it feels like a fucking dream. To where even my dreams are more normal. I feel like.
Oh boy. I mean, I think there's a big issue with the way that so many adults abandon their responsibilities to act like adults and to provide moral guidance for the young. And the staggering degree of self-delusion and lack of error correction by so many organs in society has been just astonishing. And I and a lot of the stories that you've told me and have told elsewhere indicates that there has been a fundamental rejection of those responsibilities by a lot of adults. And that's why a lot of people like you ended up in the bad situations that you were in and nearly did the things that a lot of people wanted to do.
And you know, like say how you study communism, I look at parenting and try to look at a lot of angles like that. I think I've come to the conclusion this week that if Oregon was a parent, it's a permissive mother. It's a permissive mother that allows its children to run rampant. It has two kids. One of them is clearly the favorite. The other one gets beat and shat on, gets grounded, gets its rights taken away. No one can tell this state how to parent. How dare you for even considering? You have not lived the life experience that this parent has. You are not as tolerant as this parent or state is. If you're to look at the psychology of permissive parenting and how the state of Oregon is, and then you look at the effects that permissive parenting has on its children, it's the whole state. Whereas places like Texas are more authoritative. And I'm also definitely pulling from personal examples of people I know and in my personal life and different parenting styles I'm seeing from both states. And I thought really hard about this because I was wondering if I'm like putting too much of my own personal stories onto these issues, but I'm like, no, it's very, very well representative. Texas will give you a firm hand, but still say I love you and treat you fairly, and it's not always going to do the right thing, but at least it's going to try and self-correct. But Oregon's going to let you go fucking batshit and leave your dick in the dirt, and then it's not going to take care of you when you're broken. And if it does, it's going to take care of you in a way that just further enables your shitty behavior to where you no longer have good citizens, you no longer have good workers, you no longer have good child. You have a broken child.
I think that's a fair description. A lot of people overestimate how right wing Texas is, or have a lot of stereotypes about uh, how strict Texas is with disagreement. But look, Austin is in Texas.
And
Uh,
like most of Oregon is actually red. People think this is a blue city or a blue state. There's only 3 blue areas here: Portland, Salem, and the Eugene area. That's it. Everyone else is a redneck. This is actually a redneck state. That's the vast majority. And that's the problem, is it's the minority controlling the majority. That's why they want the greater Idaho movement, so that they can separate and go do that. Is because they're like, we're not fairly represented here. We clearly make up most of the land population. So the cities are voting on rules for the cities, and then that just gets pushed off onto the small town communities that are a mountain away that have nothing to do with over here. That it's like you walked into a completely different world, and they're like, yeah, fuck Eugene, fuck Salem, fuck Portland. We don't go there unless we have to.
there
What?
are also there are also a number of state Supreme Court decisions in the 1980s about allowing mail-in ballots. And mail-in ballots are very easy to manipulate. So that's led to some speculation about uh, it is are Democrats winning elections in Oregon and Washington fairly, or is it even further amplifying some of the local elites that aren't representative of the state as a whole? So normally there would be kind of a political balance between the blue city and the red countryside, and then there'd be political jockeying. And if elections are conducted fairly, there'd be kind of a political alignment, like where, okay, I don't like Republicans on most things, but they like guns, so I'm going to vote Republican. And then some of the Democrats try to say, okay, we'll lose people on guns, but maybe we can win people on unionization. So they attract some voters that way. Normally, there's a bit of political give and take, and then there's balance. That's usually roughly even. When you have high levels of vote fraud, it just becomes dominated by one party, and then you have a lot of internal factions in that party, either becoming much more radical one way or trying to pull back towards the center, the national center.
Yeah, yeah. Like Oregon, that outsiders aren't welcome. That's why Andy No, immigrant from Vietnam, will get the shit beat out of him. Asians that look like Andy No, who show up to the protest not covering their face, or even sometimes uncovered, will get the shit beat out of them for just looking like the man. You have black conservative speakers come, the windows get fucking smashed. In terms of politicians, we had Christine Draven, who was running for governor against Tina Kotek, and I thought she was pretty damn centrist. And I'm like, look, I love what she's talking about with the environment. She seems actually pretty liberal, all things considered. I was like, she might be the first conservative that I vote for. But the vitriol behind people, or like Alex Skarlatos, like the same day I lost one of my friends for being an anti-Semitic Nazi, me, because I said George Soros had Nazi affiliations. The same day that happened, one of the things that led up to that is he was talking about, he went out with, I think, Antifa, and Alex Skarlatos was talking. And for anyone who doesn't know, this really one of the only things I know about him is he helped stop a terrorist on a train, and they made a movie about him. He like restrained him after he shot some people, and I don't know, maybe I'll clip in the trailer with this, but it was enough to have me thinking, I kind of like the guy. That's an interesting story, at least. I had other things going on, so I wasn't too deep dived on it. But my old friend's story at the time was they went and they weren't listening to what he was saying. They're like, we knew he was a Nazi. We knew he was coming in to start something. And they just kept talking about how they were disrupting his speech, and he kept trying to talk. And they kept pushing these questions over and over, repetitious, that I can't remember what they were, but I remember whenever he explained it to me, I was like, what does that have to do with what he's talking about? And they allegedly pushed him to the point of saying, you kikes always do this. And now we're talking about, he's been talking to me about how for 15 minutes, he's been bullying this man, pushing him. They're screaming at his security guards. Somebody has spat at him. And after all of this barraging, he finally uses that language. Allegedly. I don't trust this person. But it's like, if that did happen, it seems like it wasn't going to fucking happen organically now, does it? They just see Nazi and they just push and push and push. And then if you happen to use that language, it's like, we got you. That's it. You're marked down in the folder. We know you now. That's why so many people come to the protest and they do Hail Hitler. Because they're like jesting, but they know.
I mean, oftentimes, I and other people assume that anybody who goes to a conservative protest doing a Nazi salute is Antifa or some sort of plant.
It's not impossible. I mean, it's easier to do than beating somebody. If you're a coward and you don't want to go and get in a fight like your buddies are doing, but you still want to be helpful, yeah, put on a brown shirt and go put your fucking hand in the air on a hill and run away like a bitch. It's not impossible. It'd be a very, very, very simple thing to do. Like, children on the playground do it, We used to fucking do dark, stupid, silly shit like that all the time as a kid. Or, you're fucking in the bush and you throw a rock and then you hide back in the bush. Or... it's kind of like I'm seeing with the Secret Service right now is like, are we all just on the kids on the playground right now starting fights with each other? Like, not even directly. Yeah. But like, not even like in like a straight up bully kind of way. It kind of felt like that in the beginning, like 2015, 2020. But now it's more like the creative kids are coming out and are like, you really want to spice up this game? Aren't you tired of button heads like normal? What if we did something crazy today? Something we'll never forget. It's kind of what it's feeling like. Everybody's trying to one-up each other.
And people lose sight of the fact that sometimes this is about real stuff and not just interpersonal drama.
People are dying. people have been fucking dying. Like, on both sides, people in Black Lives Matter have been killed. People in Antifa have been killed. People on the right have been killed. Libertarians have been killed. Kids have been killed. There was a 14-year-old girl here who got her fucking skull caved in by the cops because someone from her school said, go be a little journalist and go out to the streets tonight. Cops got killed. Like, everyone's been getting killed. Babies have been getting killed. Kids, adults, old people. And everyone acts like they don't fucking contribute to it, you know? Like this is real. This is some real ass shit. And it's good to crack a joke once in a while, but people live their entire lives days in and days out just cracking jokes because that's what the little devil box has us doing. Everything's a meme, everything's a funny moment. I don't know, I think that's why I can laugh so hard about things is because I don't spend 24/7 doing it. You know, like you have to check in with reality. That's people in Antifa couldn't just because I think the anti-white shit started as a joke. Ha ha, white people. Ha ha, straight people. Ha ha, cis people. And then when that joke persisted for about 2 or 3 years, then it was like, but no, really, these straight people. But no, really, these cis people. And like right down to the Christians and shit, because it started out with making fun of believing in a man in the clouds or that someone came down and died and then rose 3 days later. How stupid you would have to be. You know, more intellectual, like Dawkins era shit. It went from intellectual and then it went to joking because, like, at least when I was a kid, most kids' parents were Christian. So that's what the emo kids would do, the goth kids would do, the kids who liked rock and metal and rap. It was all pushing against God, but in a joking, jesting kind of way just to piss people off. And as you get older, that becomes serious.
I mean, I remember back in 2006, mockery of a zombie carpenter was pretty common even back then. So it might have meant one thing for kids who just want to be rebellious, but even during the Dawkins era, even during the rise of the new atheists, there was a undercurrent of arrogant smugness in a lot of the new atheist movement. There were intellectuals, but there were also unpleasant people who were just jumping along to feel superior to others.
I think that was about a year or two of being in college. I think drugs helped drop that pretty quick because drugs will open up your mind to that a little bit more. But there's definitely a year or two where it's like, evolution. And it's like, yeah, evolution. Like, it was just kind of what all of the kids were doing. And I did genuinely enjoy reading some of Dawkins' stuff. I think I had a copy of the God Delusion in one other book. But being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious is not a good thing. Because if you're being, I mean,
sometimes it's good, but usually it causes more problems than it solves.
Yeah. Like, if you're going to rebel against something real. It's not to say don't rebel, but, like, I feel like some of these kids in Antifa and with these modern leftist movements kind of, like, I want to help kind of shift the focus. It's just like, okay, you do have things to rebel against. You do have fascism to tackle. You do have authoritarianism to deal with. And if that's really going to be your battle, and if you really want to be a rebel in that fight, well, you're going to have to switch things up a little bit. Because your mode of thinking, you're not focused on the thing that's really upsetting you. You're focusing on things that you can just get at in the moment, like your parents or society.
One thing I've noticed is that a lot of Americans seem to think that the intensity of emotional expression is sincerity, as opposed to the degree of knowledge or diligence that people exhibit towards that topic. So people seem to be, when somebody does something impulsive, that gets excused as, oh, they just care so much.
Mm-hmm.
If someone doesn't do the research and doesn't know what they're talking about, that generally isn't condemned as they're trying to betray the cause. That gets treated as, oh, they got distracted or something else, something that has nothing to do with their motivation about it. Whereas if you're actually trying to get stuff done, my mindset is, well, if you really care about the topic, you're going to learn about that topic. But I don't see that mindset in a lot of American society. Now, there are some subcultures, but that doesn't seem to be a general assumption.
Well, I think they're making it that way intentionally because, I mean, one of the things that's really helped me grow over the last few years is following the censorship. When they censor something, you go to that something. And those somethings were professors and Jordan Peterson's and certain videos they didn't want you getting out. Like everything they've told us not to look at or do or listen to essentially the last 5 or so years, longer, that's what we should have been doing. I kind of feel like, and I feel like for those that have, but for those, if they had or would, then you'd find yourself listening to professors, listening to people who were educated, listening to how you were lied to, listening to how all the communities you care about have been getting fucked over. You know, that's why I feel like it's so important to like amplify their voices and why I want to clip so many people into my channel as possible. Because it's kind of like me being like, have you heard of this guy? Like, have you seen this guy? Have you heard this video? Like, kind of like, go look over that channel. It's not just about my channel. It's about, you know, in my new Kanye video. Have you seen this picture of Michelle Obama? Because it was hard to find, but here you go. Bam! Or this video, like, I want the spicy shit out there because they're trying to hide the spicy shit from us. But I think that's a big reason why we have the lack of intellectual curiosity. And, you know, it's not to say everything I'm presenting is real. You know, there's probably some bullshit in there. I don't know. But, you know, I'm curious and I'm willing to engage and I'm willing to seek. And that makes me want to come together with people more. Because then you realize that since a lot of these censorships have revolved around people, with stories and lives and backgrounds and families, it really breaks that illusion. But the censorship machine is geared in a very, 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 very specific and calculated way.
Maybe. There's So dealing with enemy propaganda has always been a thing. And during the Cold War, there was the debate about, okay, the Soviet Union is trying to send propaganda into America, but we've got the First Amendment. We have to allow speech. How do we deal with this? The way the government handled it in the Cold War was allow people to speak, and if it was funded by the Soviet Union or distributed by the Soviet Union, put a label on it, and otherwise leave it alone. They would try not to sponsor people who were obviously just retailing Soviet propaganda, but other than that, people were allowed to speak. Now, that's not to say other things didn't happen, like COINTELPRO, but there was the awareness that trying to censor everybody had a political blowback. Now, secrecy was another issue where that went crazy, but trying to censor people was a lot more difficult back then. Nowadays, there is an ideological endorsement of censorship, the idea that experts can plan society far better than the general public reacting to news. So does Russia try to send propaganda to Americans? Abso-freaking-lutely. Does the Chinese Communist Party try to do that? Abso-freaking-lutely. So you have a few bureaucrats trying to say, okay, how do we stop enemy propaganda? And back during the Cold War, a lot of it was counter-propaganda. Now they're trying to eliminate the message and not just eliminate the people trying to carry it into American culture, the people trying to debate things along the same topic. And there it went from, okay, we're dealing with enemy forces, and then it becomes, now we're trying to lean on American citizens and tell them what they can and can't say. And that was a line that people in the Cold War, when we had nukes pointed at us, wouldn't cross. That's a line people are crossing every freaking day with semi-trucks.
Yeah. And man, so I've been trying to get in touch with Tim Pool for 3 months now, right? 2 or 3 months. And I've told you before about how YouTube deletes my super chats, but it'll take my money, right? So yesterday I finally got on again. I was like, oh shit, he's live. I'm going to try again. I had plenty of money on my card. I was like, I'm going to send a $5 super chat. I got my message formulated after it telling me to rewrite my message 20 times. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to send it through. I'm going to send it in with $5 and I'm going to hope for the best. So I spent about 30 to 40 minutes trying to get the money to send through, right? Bouncing back and forth between two cards that I knew worked. And I was like, this is fucking wild. And Google kept giving me different reasons as for why. And I was like, this just makes no sense. So after 30 or 40 minutes, I went on to my other YouTube account, my personal account. Guess who was able to get their fucking message across over there? With the same card and the exact same copy paste message. People like Temple, Gothics, like Christian conservatives I've been leaning into, or I've been trying to reach out to that are heavily focused on like Antifa or some sort of spiritual revival and exposing the far left. Temple, who like, as I'm sending these messages, he's literally talking about how he wishes people like me would wake the fuck up and speak out. And I'm just literally screaming at my computer, literally, like, I'm fucking trying, like wanting to punch a hole through the damn thing. I finally got on their Discord yesterday. Hopefully I can get in touch with somebody. I might have even been able to meet somebody in the FBI now because of it too. Like someone was able to hook me up. They're like, if you're serious about this and you want to get your message out there and have people have a better understanding, I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't have anybody to rat out, but if you want to know the psychology of Antifa and how we can help get these kids out of it and build some unity, let's go. But, like, as far as, like, the whole Tim Pool aspect, it's like, it knows who the fuck I want to talk to and why. And it's telling me, fuck no.
Google had over 400 meetings with the Obama White House.
That's too many fucking meetings. Like, did they even have 400 meetings with fucking Israel? Like, what? And I mean, so this is another one. And I sent this to Buck Angel too because it freaked me the fuck out. So in the video, I wanted to do a little ode to the detransitioners. And I wanted a video of some mastectomy scars that were rotted to like kind of show people like this is what we're fucking doing. I'll send you the screenshot. I typed in detransitioner chest scar rot or something like that. Every video that came up on Google when I hit video was straight from TikTok. I mean, every one. There was not YouTube. There was not Vimeo or Voodoo or whatever the fuck.
Because Google considers that to be offensive.
Yeah, and to be fair, there was a few actual detransitioner accounts, but two of them were like half and half in the description. But it was like, this is all the information. And like the thing is, I don't know if it's doing it to other people or if it's just doing it to me because it wants me to react to it. That's kind of the reason I sent it to Buck, just kind of be like, is this happening on your end too? And like, I mean, the AI ads, whenever I stopped paying for YouTube Premium because of the shit they were going to start doing in regards to how you could talk about COVID, the AI ads were very much geared to make you fucking paranoid. I had AI women telling me to eat cattails from the pond to survive nuclear apocalypse. And the more I talked about the ads in real life, the more they popped up. And the more I shut my mouth about it, the more they went away. I'm just like...
Because Google is basically a highly elaborate advertising system. They get data from various sources, including various apps that record stuff on your phone. Google buys that data, they match it to you, and then they select which ads get shown to people.
Hmm. But
So,
that's the thing is, I think they know because like at least I get a better handle on things as time goes on. But I think they know if you're paranoid, if you talk about the things that I talk about, they know how to get a response and they know how to keep you away from certain people. And of course, that makes you sound crazy as fuck to talk about, and it feels crazy as fuck to say. But it's like at this
but
point,
they've
they've
got the
taken it.
technology for it.
Yeah, like they've taken it from advertisement to psychological warfare. That's the thing. It's like I see what it's doing, and I make fun of it, but it is kind of just like, whoa, like. And now it's backed off. All I really get as far as AI advertisements anymore is AI Biden, AI Obama, AI Trump, and AI Liam, the kid who wore "There's only two gender" shirts. That one could be real, but it looks AI to me. That's the thing. I can't tell if I'm looking at a person at the time anymore, and that's really pissing me off.
I mean, I do sometimes get political ads here in DC, but it's things like Kamala Harris of donate, the sooner you donate.
Yeah. Most of those are AI now. I had one telling me that Obama wanted it for his presidential campaign. The script
What?
was wrong. Yeah. I need to start recording these too because the fucked up part with YouTube, you can't rewind ads. So if I try to go back in an ad, I can't really rewind it. So I'm just like, I'm going to start trying to capture them as they pop up. I've just had some wild shit. And then you get BlackRock smacked in the middle of there and what they're going to do for diversity, equity, inclusion. And I'm just like, why am I getting a 15 advertisement from BlackRock in the middle of all of this?
Well, if you live in Oregon and you're gay, they probably assume that you are a raging lefty. Ironically, some of the people most involved in conservative politics in DC are also gay. So the thing is, a lot of advertising is based on utter stereotypes. And
And
sometimes those stereotypes are stupid.
well, and I think it was might have been Brett Weinstein who brought it up, but I think it was about a year or so ago. Pretty sure it was him talking about how he watched a lot of conservative content on X and Twitter, being Brett Weinstein, and started getting more and more Nazi shit recommended. I've had that happen too.
I've had that happen. There's this terrible person in Minnesota, Will Stansel. And he presents himself as some sort of policy nerd, but he's a moron. And I disagreed with him. And thing is, a whole bunch of neo-Nazis also disagree with him. So because I was responding to this guy I hate, I was being shown a lot of stuff from people who also disagreed with him, who were unfortunately a bunch of Nazis trying to brigade him. So eventually I had to mute Will Stansel to avoid myself responding to him and to avoid getting shown their stuff in the feed because frankly they're as bad as he is.
As someone who's done a lot of psychedelics, when you do psychedelics, you're interacting with the universe and the universe is responding, and the balance is about maintaining that symbiotic relationship between you and reality or whatever you're going through. It's like you're going through a living, breathing thing, and you have to learn how to walk hand in hand with this thing. It feels like they're creating a living, breathing organism out of this thing. Like it's like a new flower, a new animal. You don't know what it's going to do when you touch it. We haven't figured out the science, we haven't figured out the psychology, but also scarily more is it's ever changing. But it makes it feel like this is more of a living thing, and it's like it's clearly not people at a computer desk. People are too retarded for this shit. This is like this is I mean, there was already some sort of debate as to whether or not the internet should qualify as a living sentient being or whatever at one point in time. But it's like, if that was the debate, then what the fuck is this? Because this feels like I'm doing drugs and interacting with something, and I'm scared it's going to grow teeth and eyes and bite back at me. It's weird.
I mean, there's a philosophical debate about whether an information system can be sentient. But that's a philosophical debate. Right now, I think we're just at the stage of an algorithm that tries to guess to that tracks what you respond to and tries to guess what you want based on other comments is going to quickly spiral towards one direction or another because it can never perfectly predict what your views and what you want to see is. They can only respond to what you do on that platform.
Here's the thing. Quit fucking trying to. That's
I
the
mean,
goddamn point. Quit fucking trying to
there,
predict my shit.
there are people who try to set up a social media site that doesn't. And quite often people find that boring.
Oh well. Maybe social media should be fucking boring. How tragic would it be if social media were fucking boring? Heaven forbid.
Well, I mean, on Twitter, I can read a statement from a former military sniper about area security. I can read a post by one of the leading maritime journalists, and it's in my feed, and that's because of who I interact with on Twitter. If I go onto something else, it's going to be celebrity stuff, sports, frankly, stuff I don't care about. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm a politician. I love sports. I love celebrities. Please give me your endorsement. But really, it's if I want to focus on DC politics, I can do that on Twitter, and I get shown stuff that other people in local politics interact with. If I do that on another platform like YouTube, that's a heck of a lot harder.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's a fair point. And again, you're in a very different position, and I'm the only time I ever had Twitter, I had Twitter for I think an hour, and I simulated what it would be like to write a coming out post because I was that nervous about it. And then I deleted it, and I don't know why. I think there was alcohol and sadness and shit involved. But like past that, it's like I've steered clear of it. But you do got a really good point. It's like we wouldn't have had the communications about a lot of the faults. We wouldn't have a lot of exposure. I hate that the devil's a necessary evil. It's all part of being human. It's like you have to have the destruction in order to have the growth. Which I literally have Solvet Coagula tattooed on my chest, which is basically what that is. But I don't even know. I feel like my brain's been breaking, Cyprian. I feel like all week my brain's been breaking. And I've also barely slept because of this whole goddamn thing. I think I've slept 10 hours the last 3 days, maybe. I feel like that's a very gracious number.
I'm at that point as well.
But it's important,
Yeah. And thus far, I think you've been fairly fairly clear and on top of things. So, this has been a wild week and a wild few days, and I'm actually a lot more optimistic about America because of a lot of responses I've seen in my area. Now, there's still huge freaking problems, but to know that the mayor and even a lot of the more annoying progressive local politicians say, okay, political assassinations are bad. Let's not do that. Let's condemn this. Mm-hmm. Whether they are sincere or not, it at least tells people that they consider that to be too risky to say, so they're not going to jump on the bandwagon for a civil war or stuff like that.
Yeah. And, it's like to those politicians, those people, let it sink in. It's like someone could take a shot at you too. Doesn't look like a good fucking time, does it? Like, yeah, you would want to simmer that down. I think that's all of our responsibilities right now is we all need to lower the temperature. Whether it's in ourselves, whether it's in our community. I think that I have a lot of temperature that needs lowering because I've been getting a little bit feisty about this, but it really is a good moment. Like, and it's with condolences to the families and the victims and the people shot. But the mission failed. Like, I kind of think this was that whole Black Swan event that everybody was talking about. It's kind of like, was this gonna be it? Like, I mean, I could see it being it if it went down, and I could see how it would go. Like, it would be a victory. It would be like Antifa parading in the streets, neo-Nazis coming to gun them down for doing so. That shit would pop off. It'd start with civil conflicts, but it would escalate into civil war very, very quickly, and it would make George Floyd look like child's play. We don't exist in that reality. So this is a really, really, really good thing. And I just think that people really need to share. People need to share these videos. People need to save these videos. If you see something online of something coming out in the moment, screenshot it, record it, save it to a file, because the amount of censorship that they've had with this, they should not be censoring any story in regards to a presidential assassination attempt at all. That shouldn't even be a debate. Like,
So the outcry over the incompetence, over the severity of what happened, the outcry over the incompetence, the outcry over the stupidly propagandistic mainstream media coverage, and the outcry over the few people celebrating it, I think has been a profound moment of moral clarity for people. And with moral clarity comes correction.
absolutely. Well, Cyprian, do you want to call it or do you want to go a little bit longer? I can go either way.
How about some pop culture stuff?
Oh, we haven't done pop culture yet. Okay. What do you got?
Um, well, I noticed some clips from Metropolis in one of your music videos.
Did I use one for Metropolis?
I think so.
Was it that I've been using? It's been, like I said, it's been so many years since I watched it and I was on acid. Trying to remember.
Okay. I thought maybe you had watched it more recently and decided to grab a few half-second clips from it, but
No, I was planning to though, so happy coincidence.
okay.
I barely had time for any TV. I've made time for The Acolyte and King of the Hill when I fall asleep. And The
So
Acolyte is
apparently Darth Plagueis got revealed.
what a glorious 3 seconds that was.
Darth Plagueis, this doesn't look quite so good.
I'm not gonna lie, it looked badass. Let this be my official announcement. I don't know how long it's going to take and when, but I have been putting together a plan to where I'm making a website with a friend for my art projects. And my first order of business is I'm going to edit The Acolyte into something watchable.
That
And
sounds like a great idea.
that's going to be my contribute to society because we need fucking renaissance. And goddamn it, it doesn't all have to be political. I need a rest from this. It's not going to be on YouTube, but like, you know what? The Nemoidians, they're going to be fucking Asian, okay? And you know what? The Force isn't going to be non-binary anymore, and we're going to take out a lot of the stupid dialogue, and we're going to put emphasis on the lightsabers.
Have you seen Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged?
No, but I've seen Dragon Ball Z abridged.
Okay, so you know what it's like.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great project.
I need it because, like, I want to appreciate it. All the pieces are there. It could have been so good. And like just to have it end with a shot of a creepy Plagueis coming out, at least they gave me that. I just wanted a little bit of Plagueis to finish it. I could be fun.
I mean, I kind of like the whole Darth Plagueis as a mysterious guy nobody knows about, uh, but who's looming in the background. But when you show them on screen, it kind of takes the mystery away.
Yeah, my whole thought with it going in, and a lot of other fans was like, this is going to be the Darth Plagueis book, which, of course, getting closer to it, it's like, okay, this is clearly not going to be the book. But to know that they strayed so far, and to be fair, I don't even remember the last half of that book, just bits and pieces. I've been watching the fan films a lot recently because there's been some good people putting together CG projects for it. But like, it's just so off kilter. Everything's gay. Have you listened to the audio for so the audio description that they do for Disney where it's like, oh, I'll have to clip it to you. It's sexual. They may, if you listen to the audio description for Disney Plus on the Acolyte, it's you're listening to a porno. OSHA thrust his thick saber, glancing up and down at his muscular, tight chest. It's like it's a thirst trap, dude. They're all thick and throbbing and pulsing and dripping, and next to the scenes, the director came out and said, "This is basically my Reylo fanfic. This is the Star Wars I wanted in high school." Is literally what the director said, and all the shots are starting to mirror Rey and Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi, as the audio description sexually describes to you what is happening.
Okay, I get that women like romance novels, but if you're going to turn a well-established franchise with deep philosophical roots into erotic fan fiction, I think there's a bit of a problem if it's done in that franchise. I mean, people do porn parodies all the frickin' time.
Go to Pornhub.
Letting someone do that with the actual franchise is a problem.
Like it's and they came out yesterday. It's not official. I think she came out saying it. She's like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have 3 or 4 more seasons." I'm like, "Bitch, the fuck you are." If anything, they're tossing your ass off this project. But even worse, if they let you do this, yo, they are fucking sexualizing kids. It's not Dick Towers in the background of Little Mermaid anymore. It's thirst traps in Star Wars. One of our most sacred creations outside of the Bible, George Lucas's Star Wars. I'm putting together a video on it. Like this isn't even like hyperbolic. This is like it gets worse and worse. And the star of the show put out like an anti-white "fuck you Star Wars fans" communist rap to go with it. Where she only has like one dance move the entire time. For all that culture she has, she only has one move. And it's like Disney is just sanctioning this. They're not even like issuing an apologies. They're just like, you go, girl, fight the patriarchy.
Well, the executive culture of Hollywood is that a lot of the experienced writers were forced out. And what does it, and you need experienced people in order to push back against a director who's gone insane. And directors, in order to become directors, are kind of kooky themselves. And they tend to be forceful personalities. So if a director has gone insane, you need experienced people to push back. Well, they got rid of the experienced people in the writing room.
Well, we thought we had that experienced person in Dave Filoni, who, for people out there, he created the Star Wars, which was an animated series tie-in into the Star Wars films, and it fills in the gaps between episode 2 and 3. It's where Anakin has Ahsoka as his apprentice and all that. They had a big meeting on how to save Star Wars the other day. Do you know what his grand plan was to save Star Wars?
No.
Let's remake the Clone Wars in live action with all our modern day DEI and diversity rules. So basically, take the Clone Wars, reshoot it in live action, and cram it with more commie bullshit.
Oh, great, because the brand hasn't been destroyed enough.
They're like, now we have to destroy the cartoons, which had zero complaints. I mean, for the most part, there was complaints, but like, it was way less divisive on that front than the movies.
I mean, I am convinced that people in Disney's market research department are morons. They are trying to estimate the customer base based on social media mentions without analyzing the content of those mentions, rather than actually looking at the traditional metrics like ticket sales for movies or theme parks, merchandise sales, and other product sales. So rather than actually looking at the paying customer base, they're looking at the online metrics that can easily be skewed by activists. And
Again,
because a lot
like
of people,
journalists. That's just like the journalist.
yeah, they're creating kind of a direct pipeline between allies within an information system. You have activists who are spouting a message, then the people who are in the establishment who just want to amplify that for their own power, and then they tell that up to the corporate leaders or to the other people that rely on their information. And the result is the corporate leaders say, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to rely on the supposed experts. And those supposed experts are actually just activists trying to manipulate things for their own ideological ends. And right now, Disney is in financial problems because they couldn't get people to put down the politics and focus on making money. They can't even do the politics effectively because they let the bad writing and the bad casting and the bad direction overwhelm the message.
Oh, you want to talk about
I mean,
Cyprian? Have you ever watched a movie or a show where you didn't know who the good guy or the bad guy was at any given point in time?
Memento.
Okay, that's with a purpose. dude, dude, so the characters in the Acolyte, it's you have the protagonist who should be your protagonist up to the point where the protagonist would not be the protagonist if you want to turn that character, right? In one episode, these characters will go from being the good guy to the bad guy 12 to 20 times. I want to kill the Jedi. I love the Jedi. I want to help the Jedi. I want to destroy the Jedi. And by the last episode, it's like the convolution and the moral confusion gets faster and faster and faster. Even with the villain quoting a Jordan Peterson quote about darkness. By the last show, my husband and I were so confused watching the episode. And we're like, okay, we're not dumb people, but like they brought in Osha, the protagonist, dressed in black, who is a twin of May, the antagonist, who's now dressed in white, flip-flop from what it's basically been the rest of the show. And they're fighting each other, but they've been so morally confused on if they want to save the Jedi or destroy the Jedi the entire. You literally cannot figure out who the fuck is fighting who. It's
They're
that
trying,
fucking bad.
they're trying to do plot twists, but rather than being a twist, it's just confused and sloppy, and it's
No, it's
just
more than that. It's the mind of Leslie Headland. It's the mind of the director themselves. I'm actually saying this. I didn't think I'd say this to you. If you watch it, it's the psychology of a queer Marxist in Star Wars. If there is one thing this show can be of value to people, it's representative of the internal struggle of a far left rabid activist. The I can't figure out what's good or evil. The I've never heard or read anything from Jordan Peterson, but I've embodied him into this laughing maniacal demon. Turning the Jedi, and they turn the Jedi. The whole thing is Waco. So the witches are about to sacrifice these children, are holding them against their will, are going to throw them basically into a pit, it looks like. And, you know, Jedi's like, I want to save them. I want to save them. But by the end of it, you're like, okay, so they're finally going to say that the witches are bad because clearly these have been bad guys the entire time. No, the Jedi were the bad guy. They were the colonizers. The Jedi Order becomes the ATF. The one before the main witch dies, she embodies herself into a giant shadowy demon right behind the Jedi, and the kid starts to turn to smoke like she's going to be dissipated out of reality. And the character lights his lightsaber and stabs her through the chest, and she dies and fades back into her human form. And then she's just like, I was going to let Osha go with you, and drops dead after turning into the embodiment of Satan himself, basically. Then she's like, oh, sorry about that. I was actually going to send my child to go with you. And now you're the villain for having it's Cyprian. Now that it's over, I think you should suffer it and watch it just for the psychological aspects of it. And I'm going to put together a video of the behind the scenes politics and a lot of the shit going on. This is queer Marxism cult behavior at its peak. I don't think it will go higher. I think it's crashing from here. But this is full on visual psychological representation of what the fuck goes on in these people's heads. And as someone who spent a lot of time around these people, I fucking see it. Oh man. Yeah, no, it's like I said, if there's one thing you can take from it, it is this is what the confusion in these people's heads look like. That's why the few kids that are hanging on, because like go to Reddit occasionally for like art and shit. I don't even use it for politics, but I like go to some of the Star Wars pages too. All the people that are praising the High Republic right now are like little queer kids. You go to the High Republic page, that's basically all it is. And
I've
it's
I've
yeah.
noticed that on Twitter as well. I mean, I see some people put the High Republic in their Twitter name, and yeah, they're queer Marxists. I mean, a lot of these people, Lenin wouldn't even bother spitting on them. Western Marxists, Soviet Marxists were wrong. In many cases, they were evil. In many cases, they were sadistic. Western Marxists just seem stupid and self-deluded and abusive and sadistic. There's none of the idealism or practical optimism that there was with the Soviet Marxists. Western Marxism is just fantasy.
I think you said it first, one of the first times we met. You said it the best. It's fashion and fighting spirit. That's all it is. This is just fashion. You know, like the acolyte looks cool, but it's not really substantive. Like these people look cool, but they're not substantive. Some of the most boring, retarded motherfuckers are walking around with a giant pentagram on their fucking face with ink shot down in their eyeballs. And like it's like fucked up because I'm someone who wants to like have a full face of tattoos by the time I die. I want to go fucking all out. If I could really make it as a tattoo artist, know I've made it in life, I think that'd be fun as shit. But then I look at these people and I'm like, I don't even want to fucking put dye in my hair because of you. Like this is just some level of retardation that I can't even be associated with. Yeah, like I told my husband, I'm probably gonna start blacking out my fucking pentagrams and shit before I go back down to Texas because I'm like, man, I don't want y'all to see me as that. These people are fucking retards. And I'm not the smartest, but I'm not fucking stupid. Like, I feel like I could respect some sort of old style Soviet Marxist because I can respect my enemies to a very, very high degree, but I have no respect for this anymore. It's just laughable.
I mean, I met former party members. My uncle was an officer in the Romanian Communist military.
Shit.
I've met an ex-secret police guy. These people were harsh. Some of them were just They didn't want to rock the boat too much. Others were just narcissistic sociopaths, the ex-secret police guy. But fundamentally, they weren't idiots. A lot of these Western Marxists, I mean, there's some that come from a rough life, but at least the ones that I see in the DC area, most of them are really privileged rich kids that are idiots. They make claims about, oh, society would be so much better without capitalism. Do they know what capitalism is? Do they have a plan for an alternative? Do they get why people might be resentful if people feel like their life is going to be ripped out from under them without a viable alternative? They don't get it. There's no, at least in Eastern European communism, there was an awareness that other people existed and thought differently. With American communists, they don't seem to have that self-realization.
It's it's like it's more than narcissism or ego. It's transcended that.
I think I read stuff, and I think this isn't just a simple issue of ego or a simple difference of values or theory. I think there is something in a lot of people's brains that stops them from being able to imagine what other people know or think.
Yep. And I mean, that's one thing that, you know, these people don't want to fucking hear it because they're so goddamn anti everything. But religion, again, that's the story of the Buddha, leaving your place of comfort, seeing the destruction in the world, and meditating on that and growing from that. They want to look at all these ancient practices as some sort of silly tribal belief that caused an endless series of wars. Fuck, at least just go Buddhism. I mean, Buddhists start shit in the past for sure, but like, it's like these things have been long understood, long understood, and now it's clear that there's a plot where they're trying to take us further and further away from that understanding. But like, these kids need a spiritual recentering, because I think that's a key component of it. It doesn't mean you have to believe in something, but can you sit in a dark room alone with your thoughts for an hour? You know, can you go out into a crowd without breaking down into a complete anxious fit? Anybody can recenter if they take the time to self-evaluate. And there needs to be more of a spiritual message pushed, I think, because a lot of these kids do want something greater. But I think it's going to take a lot of heart, body, soul, and spirit. You know, all that shit. It's so important.
I mean, to me, it looks like a lot of people are using sympathy for the downtrodden as a way of fooling themselves that they have empathy for other people. They don't think about what does this person perceive differently than I do? What moral choices does this person have? Do they have agency enough to own their mistakes? Because agency doesn't just mean you let people do what they want when they're good choices. It also means you let people do what they want when they're bad choices. To deny that people can make mistakes or make bad choices or do bad things or be evil is a denial of their agency. But so many people do that because they want to idealize whoever the person is. So they've confused sympathy with empathy, and the result is a lack of self-evaluation for their own failures and a lack of evaluation for their inability to predict the world. And rather, I think in large part, they don't want to predict the world. They want to have some grand ideal of this person is all good, this person is all bad. And they're not willing to break that because that would mean they'd have to engage in a lot more mental effort or evaluate their own life. And I don't think they want to do that.
And when you're saying that, I'm thinking here in Oregon specifically, the homeless industry, because it is a fucking industry. Like all of that, it's like sympathize with them so much that fuck the homeowner. Who are you to kick someone out of your fucking backyard? I've literally had discussions telling people if someone fucking breaks into my house, I'm going to shoot them. Or if someone breaks into my backyard, they're getting a gun pulled and I'm asking them to leave. And if they charge me, I'm taking them out. Or I'm going to beat them with a bat because that's what you do with intruders where I'm from. And they're just like, how can you be so heartless? How could you possibly say that about another
I
human being?
I
I'm just like,
struggle. I struggle to imagine how heartless it is to leave these homeless people on the street, scrambling for a bit of opiate,
no shit.
slowly killing themselves.
Yeah, is it fucking compassionate to walk by them while they're stroking out in the middle of the fucking road while you're sitting there with your fucking, you know?
Oh no!
No. So it's like, yeah, no, sorry, I didn't create this problem, but if the problem comes knocking on my door, yes, there's going to be an interaction. And no, my first instinct isn't going to be to kill somebody. But where I'm from, you pull guns or you get the bat and you start by asking them to leave and you stand firm and you hold your ground. And if they don't fuck off and they charge you and try to do something about it, you fucking hold your own. The fact that people don't even have that as their first instinct here anymore because of the politics, holy shit.
I mean, here
Just
in
wait till
DC,
ISIS comes.
here in DC, I mentioned that someone broke into my house, and I authorized the cops to take him to jail. And the woman was just looking at me in a rage.
Like, how dare you have a roof? And it's like, I don't even know.
I think some people confuse squeamishness with interpersonal conflict with compassion.
Because it's like, we should be compassionate. We should deal with these things. We should have a heart, but like, we also shouldn't just roll over and get fucked.
I mean, to me, compassion means trying to achieve the best outcome for another person. And if that's kind of messy, well, fuck it. Uh, so for example, you have a guy, who say got his arm sawed off. The compassionate thing is to try to stop the bleeding, try to respond, try to stabilize them, and then figure out what happened. But if the response is denial, there's no problem, oh, leave him be, that's not compassion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some people try to reinvent compassion as it's their squeamishness, their desire to avoid conflict, their desire to have power by being by being the compassionate one that gets labeled compassion rather than the actual things needed to make people able to face life.
Yeah. And I mean, was it Woodrow Wilson that came through with a bunch of policies, and he's basically like, you know what, we're gonna teach the kids how to build fucking beds. These kids know how to build beds out of wood. Like it was something along the lines of just basically trying to teach people, like, you got to put the work in if you want the growth. It's not all necessarily about payout. It's about, can you take care of yourself? Can you feed yourself? Can you clothe yourself? Can you bathe yourself? Getting back to the basics and kind of giving people something to do with their hands again. Like, so many of these homeless people here are fucking mechanics, construction workers. They were factory workers. They need shit to do. But hey, the fucking Rose City, whatever the fuck homeless group here that I can never remember the name of for the life of me, they'll get you in for a knitting group once a week. No, these men want to fucking work. And guess what? There's a lot of kids out there that fucking want a bed or want a shack to live in. It's like you have workers on the streets. You have people with home suffering that need things from workers.
I don't think a knitting group would help with the macho self-image of a lot of mechanics.
No, like I met fucking homeless people that are like, man, I just want to be in a fucking tattoo shop. I just want to be working on a fucking old Ford, or I just want to be out there in a field with a goddamn shovel because
And
anything's
that's
better than this.
ironically, I one thing I heard about was there's a lot uh, of mechanic shops that don't have a lot of mechanics. They have a hard time recruiting mechanics,
Well, the ones that they
but that's
hire are
along the
usually the
East
fucking
Coast.
assholes. Like
Well,
here, sorry.
yeah, mechanics do tend to be like that.
Well, no, I mean like here, it's like there's a lot of meth. Like there's a tweaker problem with that industry here, so that's a big problem. But then also, saying that with the homeless, I'm not saying make the homeless start working on cars because they're all on drugs. Like, but I mean, I go to a mechanic shop half the time and I'm like, oh, you're twacked the fuck out right now, dude.
Okay, when I was in Minnesota, I never saw that, and I haven't been to any garages in the DC area, so maybe that's also an issue. But
Walmart's better with it.
okay, um, okay. I mean, this is one of those huge regional and time differences because when I was in Minnesota, the mechanics looked pretty darn sober to me. They were probably the most sober bunch in the city.
I believe that.
But then working in the restaurant industry, and half the people aren't sober on the job. So it's huge differences. And what you're telling me is a lot of mechanics where you're from aren't sober, and that is kind of a surprise. But it's one of those regional differences
Mm-hmm.
because you've got a lot of mechanics on the East Coast that have a reputation for being kind of abrasive and tough guys, but it's
Which I
also
would kind of want in that. I would want an aggressive, tough guy working on my car. It's an aggressive, tough thing. Like,
but it's kind of a smaller industry. Whereas in the West Coast, I have no freaking idea.
I think it's more limited than Texas, but like, it's always funny to see. Like I said, I go to Walmart occasionally to get like tune up or whatever. It's like you have all these like rednecks and tweakers, and then California. When I went down there, it just felons. It felt like people that were gonna cut my fucking throat. But here, it's just a bunch of tweakers and deadheads and shit. And then you have like one person with rainbow hair out of the group, and you just wonder about that person, and you wonder what their day's like. And you look at that septum ring, and you look at that purple hair, and you look at everybody else, and you're just like, this must be an interesting life for you. But it's not, there's no mix, you know what I'm saying? Like it's very much the outlier. It's a very specific class of people, I guess we'll say.
Yeah, I can see that.
And not that I've gone to too many shops, but just the ones that I've gone to. It's just like, just noticing patterns and shit. But as long as it's getting fixed. But it's just sad to see all the mismanagement, but all simultaneously all the patting on the back. This is like these people got no reason to pat themselves on the back right now. Like anyone who's come in the issue of race has not solved the issue of race clearly. Anyone who's come in to solve homelessness has not solved homelessness. Hunger hasn't been solved yet. So far, nothing anyone's done going into these issues has been overall successful. And given the direction we're going in, certainly there's a lot of fronts where things are good, but the bulk of it in America seems to be more homeless, more problems, more drugs, but also more ego from the people that are purporting to be fixing it.
And I view ego as probably the biggest problem in solving it. Because, I mean, you can't eliminate a lot of these problems, but you can reduce it to the point that they don't cause other problems.
At the very least.
And sometimes that's just, oh, let things quietly die down, and people will focus on something else. And this is a problem that'll be minimized on its own. So, but sometimes people just want to put their mark on it, and the result is the problem flares up again. Other problems is, okay, there's a very simple way to solve this housing problem. Uh, so one of the problems in a lot of East Coast cities is housing prices and rental prices. One way to solve it is build more stuff. Why is it so hard to build more stuff? Lots of opposition to building a few units with a few subsidized units. So they try to block all new construction. It's an ego thing.
Whereas here, it's kind of that, where it's like, well, why not build more houses? And then they build the houses, and then it goes to nobody and remains empty, or it goes to the rich kids or foreign exchange kids. So it's like, yeah, we're gonna put these buildings up because we have such a huge homeless problem in the city. Did you know this building can hold 3,000 people? Not one of those homeless people is going to be able to afford that building. Any of them.
Yeah. I mean, right now we're at a point in which housing costs and homelessness are almost separate problems. For most of human history, it was kind of a very tightly related problem. But now so many homeless people are so dysfunctional that they can't afford the housing that's available. So we have to treat those as separate problems now, whereas they used to be one.
Yeah. And it's so sad too, because I mean, that's kind of what they're feeling in their heads is like, oh shit, all my problems are mounting up and I'm getting further and further away from a home. Like, I'm sitting here with a fucking job and I'm like, home ownership's gonna be a lot of work. Still a goal of mine. I'm not gonna let them take that out of me, but it's
Well, I've
like,
got a house, I don't want it.
fucking. I have like one house I want. I do kind of want to buy my childhood home. I always felt like that would be a really cool thing to do. Mostly to give to my mom because she always liked that house, have a vacation home. But I'm gonna need this country to be standing if I'm gonna do anything like that.
Yeah, a lot of people would like the country to be standing.
I think now more than ever, though. Now more than ever.
Uh, Now people remember, oh, hey, these words actually do have an impact.
Yeah, holding up a severed bloody head of Donald Trump actually did inspire people. Going out, the amount of times, all the kill Donald Trump music, all the time, dude, we would get creative with the ways we would torture Donald Trump. You know how many people just sit down in a room? If I could get my hands on the president, if I could get my hands on the president. It's a culture. It's a thing. Everybody's just kind of doing it because it's like, well, if we all hate this guy and he's one of the most powerful people on the planet, well, we are many and he is one. Therefore, jump in on it. And that's also kind of the sad part is I hope that it is, but I don't think Thomas Crooks is going to be the last shooter. I think that a lot of people were inspired by this clearly, and that's why we gotta lower this shit and we gotta make it as morally unacceptable as possible. So like if people are going around joking about it, you never know if that joke is gonna hit the ears of someone that actually feels inspired to do that. Who's like, I'm a better shot than he was.
And you're probably right. When you've got a lot of political upheaval and radical responses, you're going to have a lot of lone wolf attackers.
And
So
this
I'm
might
going
be where people start to group up though. That's my concern is strength in numbers. They'll be looking for the lone gunman.
I
That's
mean,
my worry.
10 years ago, I was scared of right wing terrorism and a right wing version of the terrorism of the 70s. Now it looks like it's the left wing version of the terrorism of the 70s all over again.
Yeah. And again, this is all hypothetical right now. This is all hypothetical. But I can imagine right now there's probably groups of kids being like, "All right, well how would we do it? How would you do it, buddy? Like pass the
Almost
joint."
certainly. The human mind is creative and the human mind will try to solve a problem. And if kids have been told this politician is a problem, they're going to try to solve it in their way. And it's not always a good way.
No. This again, I hope it doesn't happen. But it's like I said, it's not like Antifa's gone anywhere. They've branched out into newer groups. A lot of them don't call themselves Antifa anymore, even though they would still wave the flag or say the name that they are anti-fascist. It's not really like that anymore. It's not really black bloc. After the fracture, everybody's kind of gone out. So when I'm saying Antifa half the time, I'm just kind of thinking broadly everybody because I know these kids love that fucking word. But it's like I'm worried that they're gonna start thinking, and that's why I'm really hoping I can find other people like me that are willing to say something. I'm still looking.
Yeah. I've tried telling people about milder incidents. Like I once tried telling one of my classmates about a guy I carpooled with uh, whose wife's ex-boyfriend had gotten out of prison and needed a place to stay. Now that's an ordinary story for a lot of people. But these kids were in law school and they were just shocked by that story. There is a massive disconnect between a lot of people, even if they are supposed to be interacting very closely on a professional basis. A lot of policymakers have no idea how chaotic a lot of kids' lives are, and they have no idea just how susceptible to political radicalization and violence a lot of these abused kids are.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying, like, gotta create. That can be demonstrated through music, through videos, through art. Like, I think there's a lot of people doing it. Like Tom McDonald's the big example on my channel is you can look at those videos and you can understand his life. You can understand a person like that. You can find the parallels in your own life and link up. And funny enough, even politicians are bumping his music now, and that message kind of gets across that way. It doesn't have to be like direct activism or critical behavior or anything radical. Like, I think that art is going to help us transcend that boundary of disconnect because even lawyers like television, lawyers like music, like, again, that's one of the beautiful things about COVID that they got everybody hooked on television. That means if you start putting shit out there and you make it fucking good and you put it on the YouTube or Truth or Facebook, whatever, and it's something that you really want to get out there that you really fucking care about, then maybe it'll blow up. And then maybe that'll get to the kind of person that you want to hear that message or understand that feeling. That's why the first day that Trump died, I got that fucking King 810 song, and I'm just fucking raging, and I'm just like, they're not gonna fucking take us down. Fuck these motherfuckers. And then as I'm sitting there thinking about it, I'm like, all right, I got that out of my system, but now I'm just anxious, and I'm just like foot tapping, and I'm pacing back and forth. And I was also on day 2 without a cigarette. What a hell of a time to stop smoking. Day 3 now. But no, that I'm like, moving on to the Kanye song, making it a little more positive, and hopefully that just reaches people it needs to reach. And it's a little thing. It takes 2 or 3 hours for that.
I mean, what about writing a story, whether a real life one or a fictional one, about kind of the process of being abandoned by society and turning towards stupid ideologies that seem to promise some sort of power or liberation from some idealized enemy, and just how destructive that is.
Which, speaking of which, I have been writing after reading yours. It's going to be in depth. I'm reading it though, and I'm realizing you're going to think I was crazier than ever before. But yeah, like getting that shit out there, starting a blog, like I don't know. I feel like whenever I finish, we should read our stories if you're down. If you want to do like a reading for the audience, I feel like that could be fun.
Sure. Although, I mean, have you played Star Wars: The Old Republic, the MMO?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Think about the Imperial, the Sith storyline. that kind of touches on kind of the reaching towards the dark side for power and hoping that it's liberating. But the actual pattern is quite often it destroys the people who rely on it.
Hmm.
I mean, that feels like a metaphor for so much of human behavior. And I think the dark side of the force is a stand-in for a lot of social reliance on hatred and negative emotions for power that we saw in the 1900s and 20th century.
Yeah. And again, that's why I really want you to see the Acolyte. It's because it's like the dark side represents a really, really real thing. Negative emotions, bad frequencies, like hatred, anger. And turns out it's such a powerful thing that it'll even come out of your fucking writing and manifest and bite you in the ass. Like, it's not fun to feel like you're above somebody else. It's really not. And to laugh in it and to bask in it and to think that you have power over their lives, like we did with the police and different people in our community who we didn't agree with, that leaves you feeling so fucking shitty. You want to put a bullet in your fucking head.
I think that's because you've got certain emotional responses that some other people do not. I mean, I don't know what exactly is going on that causes some people to revel in the sense of power over others and others to feel pain at it, but there is a difference.
I think good parents, because it's like, yeah, I had the shitty father figure to rebel against, but I had a good mother. You know, I had the authoritative parent, the one who said, I love you, but you need to knock it off. Or you don't know everything. Or hey, other people are in the room around you. Or hey, put down the phone, go read a fucking book. Or you've been on the video games enough, go outside. Be back before the lights turn off. I at least had that. I think that definitely helped. And that's why I really look at the parenting angle in terms of politics so personally, is like I've seen the personal impact of it in my own life. I've seen authoritative parenting, and then I've seen whatever the other one is, the authoritarian parenting through my biological father, and then I've seen permissive parenting through various other people in my life. And when you break that down in terms of political structure and how different cities and countries and all that are run, I mean, we all really are kind of the kids of our government. That if they're the ones taking care of us, fostering us, paying for us, as much as we don't like to think of it, we are their kids. So we're going to have the same psychological effects collectively.
Okay. I mean, we didn't really touch on this before, but you do realize I was in the Romanian orphanage system. So when you say kids of the
Oh, I forgot
government,
about that.
uh,
Mm,
I kind of feel that a bit more.
yeah, like I gotta know it's not the greatest phrasing, but I don't. Is that a good way to look at it? I feel like it makes sense to me.
It makes sense in a certain way. Um, it kind of does describe the a lot of the reactions people have and the mindset a lot of people have. Uh, what becomes scary is that some people take that as, instead of being kind of a description of a behavior and response, people treat that as if that is the way it should be.
Yeah, like what do you mean? Like in terms of like how? Explain
I
that a
mean,
little bit.
well, it's normal for a parent to discipline a child, but when the government disciplines a people, then things become a heck of a lot scarier.
Oh, so you're basically saying you don't want saying like it has to be like this parenting style or this parenting style.
I do
Like
not
I'm not
want
saying like
I do not want politicians thinking of themselves as the parents of the people.
no, that's not what I was. No, me neither. I just mean in terms of like if you look at the psychological effects of children and what it has in terms of like okay, so like you're raised sheltered. Well, kids are now being raised sheltered with Facebook. This is censored. This is kept away from you. This is kept quiet. That's the room. Well, then you go out into real life, and then you do start to see explosions, and you do start to see riots, and you do start to see dead things. Breaks them. Whereas when you don't censor and you allow for that content to go through, I kind of think of my mother growing up, and it's always having her bookshelf. She was a history teacher and an English teacher, so like she had books on the Holocaust. She had you know books about the Roman and Greek gods that had paintings that did have nude imagery in there, and there were historical books that showed various battles of World War II and Vietnam. So I was never kept away from that. It was never pushed on me, but it was always there, and I knew I could walk over and get it. So at least whenever I started to see these things as I got older, I'm like, oh, this is what this is. Whereas if you're kept from that information and you live in a place like the West Coast where everything has to be kept from you, everything has to be kept sensitive. We have to dance around your trauma. We can't possibly poke your bubble. Then when shit really happens, people don't know what the fuck to do.
Oh yeah, the secrecy results in helpless people who then demand more control from the government, not less.
Yeah.
That's a known pattern in a lot of autocratic regimes. That it's the government tries to direct the lives of ordinary people to a degree that ordinary people can't handle real conflict or a real disagreement, and the result is they rely on the government, and the government's power expands, and the government gets confused, and that creates huge amounts of factions within the government, and it just becomes a big mess.
Yep. That's Oregon. We're all children responding to how we were raised by our systems and by the systems in place.
Well, at least I have uh, the self assurance that the way I raised is not a good way, or at least a lot of it isn't.
Know what to avoid. It's kind of how I feel with my dad. Like there's a lot of good in there that I'm trying to cherish and like hold on more to as I get older because it can't all be resentment and hatred. But there's a fucking devil in that man. There's a fucking devil in that man. But you know what? There's an angel in my mom. So, and having both of those lives and seeing both of those realities, I just kind of walk through life thinking about that to where it's like, what do I want in life? Do I want to live with my mom or do I want to be that dragged to my dad's? Do I want to hang out with the angels or do I want to wallow with the devils? Hmm.
And you can perceive a difference.
Yeah, it helps. It creates, I feel like it really structures the yin and yang. Like I try to see it more of a blessing than a curse.
Some of the stuff you've mentioned about your father was pretty freaking awful. But I've run into people who claim their parents were abusive, and they can't provide anything that I can clearly identify as abusive. I mean, yeah, emotional abuse does happen, but sometimes it just feels like they're treating, oh, you didn't smile at me or hug me enough, and that's terrible.
Yeah,
And
that's how I felt with my stepdad. And then I created fights with my stepdad about that to the point where it's like, okay, we'll go live with your real dad. And then it's like, I would do anything to be in the room with my stepdad coming home tired without a word to say to me. I would fucking kill for that right now. Like, and not to say he wouldn't say a word to me. He's a mailman, so he's walking around day in and day out. So you're going to be beat after that. But I took that as a kid as, why don't you give me all your attention whenever you get home? Mom gives me all her attention whenever she gets home. Yeah, my mom's a teacher. She's dealing with kids all day. I'm just another fucking kid to her. Well, I mean, I'm her kid, but So I took those things so personally, like a lot of these kids do. But unlike these kids, I was thrown to the wolves. My second year living there, the second bee I brought home, my dad fucking freaked out, raided my room. I think he found a copy of my Necronomicon that I was reading, stripped
The
everything out of my
China
room.
one?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I got my grandma to buy it for me at Hastings. Actually, I kind of was sneaky about it. I'm like, it's a fiction, and I mean, it is, but it's just like she's a very religious woman, so I kind of had to play it out a little bit. But whenever I got home, everything was taken out of my room, including my clothes, except for a mattress and a picture of Jesus Christ tacked to the wall. This is a man that I soon learned later that apparently he was tweaking out one night, and I think he was like tattooing on one of his neighbors at the time, and he got into a fight with one of his neighbors, and I guess his neighbor scratched him, and he accused his neighbor of being an AIDS infested monkey. At some point, wound up naked with a machete after struggling with this man, crawled up to the roof and had police helicopters and a spotlight on him.
What the?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stories like that. Now that was before my time, but after all the shit started coming out, and I'm like, hey, I think my dad's a piece of shit. People are like, oh yeah, buddy. Oh yeah. And I'm just like, oh shit. Chasing down young black girls with knives and threatening to fucking rape them, like just shady shit. Where I was like, whoa, my daddy's a racist, raving lunatic. And then, like again, the types of people he was hanging out with, and the fact that I walked in on him drawing a fucking thing of Hitler. Now you mix that in with the culture that tells you everybody's a Nazi, and everybody's like, my dad's a Nazi too, my dad's a Nazi too. And I'm like, oh shit, you got caught by surprise too? Fuck, so did I. But with my stories being more powerful like that and being that fucking intense, I think I kind of became the competition for a lot of kids to where they try to one up, or one kid tried to do that to me, and it's just like, yeah, my dad took me out on a hunting trip once and shot a deer in front of me. I was begging for that when I was a kid. Nobody took me hunting. That's bullshit. But it's like, even then, it's like, I get the soft side empathy, but you're calling abuse? And they made you go to church? Yeah, I hated going to church, and I was screaming abuse at the time. But now that I'm older, I'm like, no, it was just an inconvenience. Like, what the fuck else was I doing on a Sunday? Oh no, I had to go get some culture. But I just hate that I told those stories in a way that encouraged a lot of people's bad behavior. That made them think, I don't want another kid to have to grow up the way that Ty did. Or that, did you hear the story? Have you heard the story of my friend Ty and his dad? Well, he's out there and he's in Antifa now fighting the good fight. That's the shit I grapple with, where it's like you have to be very, very responsible with how you handle your trauma and how you tell your stories. Otherwise, you create hell. Like the first few years of my husband's life, he thought all my family were racist, homophobic, transphobic lunatics. And once I snapped out of it, I had to be like, okay, this is where I fucked up. This is where the perception came in. My grandma actually fucking saved me from my homophobic fucking father. And, yeah, my aunt's a racist for fucking sure, but you know what? She's one hell of a bad bitch, and let me tell you why. And like having to grapple with that and like sit with someone you've lived with for years and be like, I think I lied about my family and these people. And having to explain that it's a different kind of weight, dude.
That
But
that that background, those mistakes, and that reevaluation is a powerful story. I think that it is very much worth. My instinct is to write about it, but
you keep inspiring me to more and more. Like I said, I've definitely started, and I'm 3 or 4 pages deep, and I'm like, honestly, this is gonna be a lot. Like I'm gonna try to make like a condensed version, but then I'm like, I think I'm gonna branch this out because like I've got the cocaine era, I've got the acid era, I have the tongue talking era, I'm going into like straight up demon communication in this shit. Like times I'm trying to fuck around with psychedelic entities and make shit happen, and I'm just like looking at the step by step process, and I'm like, this is satanic and dark as shit. And it sounds like every super radical conservative conspiracy theorist's worst fucking nightmare. It's like if you look at the order of events, it almost looks like I manifested a new reality. You know, like, I don't know, part of me's, I'll go ahead and tell it. So, like, reading a lot of witchy shit, occulty shit, but my brain's so fucking fried, so I'm like collecting these books and I'm reading this shit, but it's bits and pieces. So I'm doing that and I'm mixing drugs. A lot of kids, whenever they grow up on pharmaceuticals, like I did, and antidepressants and shit, they see shadow people. Like people my age that I've grown up with who've been through a lot of the same psychological shit, when they were like drugged up on kids really heavily as a kid, in times of stress or panic, walking around in the dark, or waking up from a panic in the middle of the night, seeing shadowy figures or large dark shapes and shadows walking around. It's a really common psychological phenomenon, and I think it has to do with something with triggering the fear receptors in the brain. There's the alien part of me that wonders if it's real, of course, but in keeping it in terms of just reality and not getting too crazy with it for the moment, we'll just keep it there. So, but at the time as a kid, seeing those types of things, you're like, well, what the fuck are that? What's that thing with the horn and the horns and the hooves that just ran out into the woods when I'm sitting there 3 a.m. haven't slept in 2 days, high as fuck on cocaine, scared that my dad's going to be come to kill me for the last year and a half. Well, yeah, I wonder why the shadow's there. But whenever you come up here and you have all this new age mysticism shit, and you have all these stories about aliens and local folklore, and you're meeting people that, yeah, we'll say they are basically magicians and wizards in a sense, that you meet some people here, it's like you can't possibly be from this reality. I've met some insanely magical people here that will open up things to you and borderline send you on a journey. But unfortunately, whenever you stray from those people, you find the other wizards, which are the drug dealers. And, they're kind of the faux shamans. And so you start tinkering with psychedelics because, well, if you can manifest entities under a certain psychological state, and you can see, elves and twirly shit on acid all the time, what more can you see, right? So one technique that I learned about from a book was to create a dark mirror where you get a bulbed out frame and then a flat background, and you paint it matte black. And then I just dosed myself up with all sorts of psychedelics. Again, I was mixing drugs and alcohol all the time. And I just sat in a dark corner of a room and I just stared at it. And the point is, you're supposed to lock eyes with yourself, and then the shadows start to come to life. And shit starts running around you and biting you and reaching out to you. And it's like a dark meditation. You're trying to stay absolutely still. Moves on to a whole nother series of me waking up from dreams where a demon is throwing me down the stairs and through glass on repeat over and over and over, and dragging me back in my room through my blood, and then resetting time and throwing me back down the stairs over and over and over. And then, I was living in a house with an agoraphobic who I'm not sure if she was the dude's wife, daughter, mail order bride. There was no contact. She was always locked in a room, and he was just an old man. She was a little Asian lady. So he's sitting there here at the end of his life, basically. I have a drunken roommate upstairs who's completely falling apart. She's locked in a room, and when she comes out, she wants to fuck me half the time. And I'm just like, my God, no. And then you start seeing this, and then they start having all these crazy life events, and then they're like saying, oh, we're seeing shit in the house too. And I'm not knowing if it's me putting that out into their consciousness or what, but a lot of bad vibes from that house. But ever since that point afterwards, that's when shit started to go really, really downhill. And I was just like, I need to see these things. I need to see these things, because the problem is I didn't run away after that point. I kept going. It's like chasing a dragon, because, well, if you saw that under a state of panic, you've had good psychedelic experiences, then you can get that back, and you think you can move reality around, Again, just like the fucking queer Marxists do. Satanic queer Marxist. And then you can't. And then when you finally break free of that and you look around at the real world and everything's not dragons and rainbows, it's like, oh, I was in my own little world. And it's like I went on some sort of magical fantasy adventure in real life where there were demons and there were angels and there were giants and the sky would crack apart and the earth would swallow itself and everything was a 3D hologram just being spat out of the walls of reality itself. But it started so fucking dark, and I still have a lot of psychological conditions from that I've had to talk with my therapist about in depth. And one of those things became hearing voices to the point where I thought my neighbors were plotting to kill me because I would hear, we lived in a apartment building with all these cinder blocks, so people's voices would kind of bounce back and forth. That would translate in my head on top of the drugs, on top of the alcohol, on top of the trauma, on top of me thinking my father was coming to kill me every 5 seconds, that he was going to drive across the country and shoot my ass. And still tripping with everybody, still going to parties, still doing drugs with people, trying to pretend like that wasn't my reality. And my story isn't fucking unique. It's hundreds of kids here because they tell me their stories and I've heard them. But it's like, how do you explain that to people without coming off as bad shit? I'm just willing to come off as bad shit. That's the only difference. Like, people already see me as crazy. I don't care if I put it out to the world. I'll tell you all everything. It's just, but that is the reality a lot of kids are facing.
And you've got a lot of rich people that I see in DC whose attitudes towards drugs is, oh yeah, sometimes I do a little bit of ketamine on a writing project.
Mm-hmm. So such thing as a little ketamine. I would give myself like a gram of ketamine. I'm like, I'm going to make this last the year. So I'd wake up in the morning and I'd do one snort. And then about an hour later I'm like, well, that wasn't that much. That wasn't that much. Well, that wasn't that much. Until 3 hours later, you're like, fuck, that was a gram of fucking ketamine. That type of shit. Maybe not a gram. I don't know if I was buying grams of ketamine, but enough in the bag to be like, it's not medicinal. And a lot of these kids fool themselves that it's medicinal. Like their dealers dropping off medicine at their fucking place every week.
Well, the thing is, rich people handle drug addiction in a different way than a lot of poor people.
Probably a lot of ways. They have options.
Among other things. But some of it is, if you're a poor person using drugs to escape some of the nasty things of your life, you're going to have a lot darker experiences, and you're going to have a different pattern of usage than a few rich people getting high at a few parties and having other people who will just take it away from them so they don't become a public embarrassment.
Yeah. Like, it's a very, very different world. I just want more of these kids to come out and explain that world to people, because it has to be understood, because that's what most of these kids, at least on the West Coast, live in.
So on the East Coast, you see a lot of people who say, "Oh, drugs are harmless." I mean, I know someone who did a bag of coke. I don't know what the sizes of it was, but whatever. And they're going to say, "Oh yeah, and he's a fun person to deal with, and he's okay." And these are rich kids.
I bet he is a fun person to deal with. I bet he's a happy guy to be around.
For a while.
Keep happy.
But they're dealing with kind of a lower rates of usage and less dysfunctional people in general when you're dealing with rich drug users. When you're dealing with poor drug users, all bets are off. So people push for legalization or decriminalization based off of, oh, me and my rich buddies have a bit of a fun time, but it doesn't seem to destroy our lives. Whereas for poor people,
yeah. And it's like as much as it sucks that Texas hasn't legalized weed yet, especially by the time I'm going back to live there, which I never expected. At the very least, I feel like it provides an opportunity to say, okay, before we do, look at the negative effects over here and what it's doing to some of these kids and how it's contributing to some of the brain rot, and maybe think, okay, if we do this, how can we do what they did but better? Because that's the thing, right? You want to take what someone did if you're going to copy it, but you want to do it better. But that means you're going to have to get ground level and actually understand things. It's not all great. If I don't have this fucking pen, if I lose this, I lose my fucking shit. And my husband rolls his eyes. And he's like, I don't fucking know. I'm like, well, I just fucking had it. God fucking damn it. And I'm stomping around all over the fucking place. That's addiction. I can't go a fucking 15 minutes without this shit. That's it. This isn't like pot of the 1970s. This shit is so much more concentrated now. It's so much more powerful. This is a drug. It's the drug I've chosen, but it's a fucking drug. I can't. I yeah. It almost just came out of my mouth. I'm like, I can't live without this shit. Like, it's very. It's not good because it makes me feel weak because it's like I've gotten over drinking. I'm on day 3 past smoking. I don't have a patch today. Apparently, I'm doing no patch today. That's a good thing. So I did 2 days no patch. Today, I'm no patch. But even then, it's still like, this is going to be there because it's addicting. And this is 20 to, well, actually, this was a $36 dab cart that's lasted 24 hours.
Well, it's I've stayed away from marijuana because, frankly, I don't trust any burning plant matter in my lungs, but especially not ones with psychological effects like that. But it's also there were a lot of people who claimed that it was harmless, but really, if it has an effect on you that strong, is it likely to be harmless?
And for a
So
lot of people, I think it's harmless, but,
for
and then
about
there's,
for
sorry,
90% of people, marijuana usage seems to reduce anxiety. For about 10% of people, it increases it. There seems to be a number of people with a latent disposition towards schizophrenia that gets chemically activated by, among other things, marijuana use. So,
yeah,
so it's a difficult thing of it seems to work for most people. There seems to be a subset that it causes some problems for, and then a tinier subset where it just seems to trigger something that was already capable of being triggered.
yeah. And this is a good opportunity to go into this too, because, like, so again, don't self-diagnose. I thought I was schizophrenic for a while because of the voices that I was hearing. It turns out a lot of it was a mix of drugs, but also when I was talking to my therapist about it, we came on complex PTSD, and apparently, in times of high stress, along with mixed drug use and of mixing up with your psychosis and shit, it really fucks with shit. And it's a weird one to talk about because it took a while for me to even talk to my husband about. But I think I went probably about probably about 6 months without hearing voices outside of my house and the head in the other room, just all around at once, just kind of disembodied. You know, I didn't hear that until about 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago with the Trump assassination, where I was so worked up. I was so fucking emotional. I've been slurping this thing down all day, and come nighttime, and on top of the coffee that I was drinking, the elevated heart rate, it started going off again for the first time. And I'm like, holy shit. Because even though I like it when I can't hear what they're saying, but it's kind of like when a psychedelic entity communicates with you, how you can feel the emotion and you can feel what's being communicated. It's almost like there was just kind of like a plotting thought behind it. And that shit just fucking scares me, man. And it's like, I let that dictate my reality in Antifa because this was going on heaviest during Antifa. You know, that's why I look at this Thomas Crooks situation and I'm just like, I feel like I could have been a voices in my head kind of shooter sitting on a rooftop trying to be a hero. That's not really that far off for a guy like me. And I just want to be able to get past that and help other people get past that. But I feel like I have to discuss it honestly. Like, yes, the guy coming on your YouTube talking about reptiles and conspiracies all the time, dropping crazy music videos with violent imagery, has voices in his head. I want to understand why that is. I think we all need to understand why that is because clearly that's one of our biggest problems right now. Like, this wasn't a veteran. This wasn't some Iranian Chinese agent that went after the president. It was a 20-year-old kid looking for a sense of purpose, isolated, and don't know history of drug use yet, but probably, definitely poor mental health. And even if it
Apparently,
was pharmaceutical. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
apparently his parents were libertarians, so they might have had a more tolerant attitudes towards drug use than maybe the general population.
And even pot, I would say it's worth examining, you know? Don't fucking throw the baby out with bathwater. Don't call people crazy for it, even if there's just pot in the system. Look at that. Also recognize he might have been the fall guy like Lee Harvey Oswald. But there's still a reason why that kid is there, regardless of taking all the other stuff out of it, focusing on Thomas Crooks. Because as much as this kid's a fucking terrorist and he got what he got, I also probably one of the few people right now who has a heart for this kid. And I see him as being a victim just like anybody else in this country right now of a broken society, lashing out, trying to do the right thing, mentally broken, and this it's horrible. But in his head he felt like he was doing the right thing. You don't do that thinking you're the bad guy.
Again, I urge you to write.
Should get a Substack. I feel like that could be a fun writing exercise. I had one and I subscribe to people. I don't ever go on there, but I occasionally get the emails where I can read articles, and that's always nice. But
Um, I mean, Substack seems like a good start, but I mean, these are powerful stories. These offer a great deal of insight. But realistically, the people need to hear it. Probably won't listen to a long video like this. Putting it into text reaches different kinds of people than a YouTube video does.
I think you're completely right. And honestly, I think I really want to thank you in that because I feel like you're the inspiration I needed to start getting writing again. Because so it sucks when that gets taken out of you as a kid, and then by the time you get to drugs and alcohol, and you can't even pick up a pencil anymore or hold a thought, it's like you're having all these deep, intrinsical, universal breaking thoughts. But try writing it down. The first time I did, it looked like something out of a demon possession movie, like something out of Emily Rose. I was like, what the fuck is this? And even 4 or 5 months after I quit drinking alcohol, it took forever for the words to stop jiggling on the pages of books and just till it was finally clear again. Like the ink would never even be black. It was just always black and green shimmering back and forth. So I'd fucked with my head and my vision that fucking hard. Like, it's not good. It's a real trap. Like, I think a lot of kids are seeing that, which is nice. But you also don't want them to become shut-ins that don't go out and live their life at the same time just because we fucked up so hard.
And I think we're kind of getting into that point. I mean, there's a pushback in free range kids, but there's a lot of kids who are just trapped inside, and who, when they get out of school, they have very little life experience, so they get scared and gravitate to anybody advertising safety on a college campus or in the outside world, and the result is not pretty.
No. And it's tested. At this point it's just been tested time and time again that this shit isn't working. And it's like when something doesn't work, you have to try something new. Like we have to start trying new things, looking at things in a different way. Because the old shit doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, my thought about that is a lot of kids don't have the opportunity to explore and take risks anymore.
Yeah.
And some of that is because parents are have so few kids that they can devote all their anxiety towards those kids. So they end up kind of smothering their kid with their attention.
Mhm.
But it's also that the outside world is kind of dangerous nowadays.
Yeah.
You've got crime is kind of hard to measure, but a lot of areas that used to be thought of as safe, where you could move to there with your kids and let them wander around, that's not possible in a lot of areas anymore.
Did I tell you that a stranger tried to pick me and my husband up in his truck? Like we were two little kids?
What?
Dude, okay, so this is. I don't know how long ago this was. This is less than a year ago. So we're just walking up the road here and we're going to the bus stop because there's a bus stop up the road. And this guy literally he stops his car, this big fat Mexican guy, looks fucking shady as fuck. He's just like, "Hey, you boys needing a ride?" And we're just like, "No, we're just walking over to the bus stop. It's cool." And he's just like, "What? Well, are you sure?" And he's just getting real aggravated about it. And we're just like, "Yeah, man, we're cool. Keep driving." Our denial of getting in his truck prompted him to start pounding on his steering wheel, go, "Fuck! Fuck! Fuck! Fuck!" And then he looked around real quick and then he sped off.
What
And me and my husband were like, "What the fuck?" My husband's almost 30. I'm 27. I'm like, "What the fuck was that?" Like, facial hair, tattoo. Like, did he think we were kids from the high school? Like, what? Dude, I never even had that happen as a kid like that.
That's
It
a good
was
evening.
weird.
I mean, do you think it was maybe a mistaken drug deal, or a
I've
mistaken?
had a couple theories, but all I can ever think of in my head is just any movie that ever plays with a guy pulling up in a van ever.
Okay.
I don't know. It could have been any number of things, but just the optics. If that's what we're having to deal with as two adult men, what
Kids
the
don't.
fuck are the kids dealing with?
It's so schools are supposed to be safe places where, okay, kids may not learn how to be a really uh, greatly socialized kid in school, but they at least have the basic instructions for how to navigate society without fucking up too badly. That's
Yeah.
gone. The teachers are lunatic. Well, a lot of teachers are lunatics.
Mm.
I'm sure there's plenty who are just trying to do the right thing and they're relying on bad experts. But
Yeah.
come on,
Oh, and the
schools.
teachers recognize it too, because a lot of this with the teachers. Again, my mom's a teacher. It's the
They're
administrators. It's all the executives. They give all these jobs and they create all these administrative level positions, and that
and
just
they're
takes away focus from the ground.
and that's part of it. I mean, So the school system is so mismanaged and so full of bad stuff that it's not a safe place for kids anymore. So it's kind of a shrinking arena in which there's fewer and fewer places for kids to safely explore the world and to make mistakes.
And for some people, that's the top of a roof at a presidential rally.
Fucking
Like
hell.
seriously, that's seriously what these kids are thinking. It sounds so extreme to jump from that to that, but when you're just brought to that point and you have nothing and you feel like you have nothing, then you have to create something, even if that something comes after you die. You know, that's why that show, there's that one Netflix show for a while. It was all about that girl who committed suicide in the school and she like left a note in her locker and shit. I just remember seeing scenes from that and I'm like, y'all are just pumping up suicide. Like you're just
Yeah.
getting suicide into the consciousness. You know, Suicide Boys, I love it, but they were unique. They actually did a lot to talk about. You look at the lyrics, it's mental health. It's actually geared towards people like me, I feel like, minus a lot of the gang culture shit. But, you know, people who are on drugs going through a hard time. But a lot of people would take the shit they were singing about and then they would kind of go off with their own version of it, which is no, take that, but lean more into it. And with Suicide Boys, it's a mix. It's like ICP. You know, they want you to love each other and jump around and be buddy buddy, but then you simultaneously listen to the lyrics and it's about chopping people's heads off. It's about understanding the art. But when everybody wanted to start being Suicide Boys, when everyone wanted to start putting suicide into their lyrics and putting new imagery around everywhere and slit wrist and shit, well, simultaneously, it seems like more people are committing suicide.
Yeah, I mean, one of the oldest works of statistical sociology was the discovery that suicide occurred in clusters. When one person commits suicide, it lowers the resistance of other people to doing that. So one person kills himself, a bunch of other people see that they're more willing to kill themselves, and some of them do. So the lesson for that is uh, don't romanticize it.
Yeah, and I've it sucks that like ever since I've left high school, there's always been someone in my life dancing on the edge of suicide, and I've always been someone who's been there for those types of people. But a common theme with these types of people is they're dealing with suicidal grief of their own that they haven't addressed, loss of a loved one. There's only one or two people in this whole slew of people, of which there are many, that doesn't really apply to. It's always, without this person, my life is nothing. I wasn't able to get this. I can't get my thoughts off of this. People don't understand me. No one understands what it's like to lose a mother. And I don't understand a lot of the things they're going through, but I try to be there for them regardless. But that suicide thing really, really pushes them down harder than a lot of things because they also have it in their head. It was so quick, it was gone in a second. And they'll tell me that. They're like, it would only last a second, just like my dad or just like my mom. And they can't get that thought out of their head.
And because of social isolation and exposure to self-directed media usage, they may not have the people around them to take their mind off of it.
Oh, it sucks because it's so many people. And then you have the people that see that you're that type of person for those types of people, and then they try to take advantage of it. And then simultaneously, you have people that are coming to you with it genuine, but it's been years, and you realize that you're their entire support structure, and that they've essentially taken their trauma of suicide and realized that you're the empathetic one, and they've milked you for every drop to the point of eventually you just have to walk away because it's like I can't let your grief dictate my life anymore. And that's a hard thing to do. But then you'll have other people who just make up things entirely just to get a little sympathy out of somebody. where when you just start to detect flaws in their story, you're like, hold the fuck up. Something's not right here. Like, I've opened my door to you and this is not making sense. To where when you do start to let them open up like no one ever has before, they show you their true character and they can't stand it when you call them out. I've got to meet a lot of people. I feel like sometimes I'm a therapist without a therapeutic license.
Hmm.
Like, it's just kind of been my role ever since high school. And, like, to various degrees, I feel like I've been a good therapist, a bad therapist, an abusive therapist, maybe in my young years, a manipulative therapist. But people are always, like, coming to me for shit. So I'm just like, I'm willing to hear you. Some dark shit.
That matches up. Hmm. There, I think there's probably a connection between the hippie culture that took root in the 60s and a lot of the combination of therapy speak, badly neglected young people, and rise in abusive subcultures.
Yeah. The longer I've lived here, the more and more that's made sense.
I mean, there's a saying, a nation of sheep begets a rulers of wolves. That being too passive towards uh, people can often lead to them being taken advantage of by bad people. Now that's huge for politics, but when it comes to mental health issues and drug issues and uh, people seeking various forms of social support, that seems like a very direct connection.
Yeah. It's the do what thou wilt, be free, do you, no one could judge me. It's like, I mean, nature judged us when we fucking couldn't stand up to a bear, climb a tree, or stand up to fire. Like, or oh, that's just what builds evolution, judgment, you know, humility. That's what builds us up. When you take away all of those things, you take away the growth and you just cripple. And there's like a natural order to things. There's a place for that type of shit. Like, God, I think it'd be cool to run around fucking Burning Man and dressed up like fucking Mad Max, or maybe the alternative, dressed up like a fucking angel, dosed out, dancing around a fire. But you gotta go back to reality at some point. And for a lot of people here, they never came back to reality. But they had
That
kids.
makes that makes sense. That makes sense. There's a deep story there. That definitely seems like something to explore. And well, that's not my area, but that is absolutely a story that should be told.
I feel like I'm just gonna wind up writing a book. I've always wanted to, so I mean, I may as well. Got something to write about now, because that's another thing that made me so angry back then. Was like, I can't think of anything. I have no story. I have no perspective. I have no grip on all these things that I want to explore. Like, I could sit down and watch Prometheus, but I could never write my own Prometheus. You know, like, I always like Star Wars, but I can never write my own Star Wars. Now that I've gone through all this, it's like, oh, because I didn't have life yet. Now that I've gone through all this, I'm like, okay, now I probably have more perspective than ever to jump back into that. And all the questions that I used to have, I feel like I can fill out now. So it's like, life's what you make of it. But I'm definitely going to be writing a lot more, because as much as I love the videos, I think I'm probably going to start needing a break from the videos, because for the sake of my own mental health, I mean, it's still reaching out and shit, but like, I need to like start introducing other things into it, because I don't want it to just be videos and then tattooing and then videos and tattooing whenever I get things figured out. I want to be able to do a lot of things. I think it'd be cool to try and tinker with doing music, or editing movies, like I said, I'm gonna do with the Acolyte or playing with AI.
Your video editing has a flair for the dramatic and somewhat synchronized with the music. I mean, I think you've got a lot of potential in video editing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's fun and like it's the kind of music videos I respond to because like I love the music videos where it's just politics flashing through the screen and, and tragedy because I'm just sitting there when I watch those and I'm just like somebody else sees this too. Like you kind of feel like you're the only one and you tear up a little bit. And I was like, that's probably switch it up over time. I don't know where it's gonna go, but for the moment, it's like I feel like that's what spoke to me, and I just want to try and make it. And it's super easy too. If anyone else wants to make them, shit, then there's more to watch. you know, like I don't know. There's just so much we can do. We all just pretend like there's nothing we can do about anything. Doesn't I don't think that's ever been true. You know.
I think, look, rap isn't my genre. I don't particularly care for rap as a musical style. But you've got some powerful stories that you could turn into music.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever be a rapper. I always wanted to tinker with singing. I've never like sung in front of anybody. I'm always the guy who just sings to myself. I always think of that. Is it the men who stares at goats? It's like you can dance. Somebody just told you not to, and then he has a flashback to his childhood, and his dad's like throwing some shit at him, being like, "You can't dance." I think it's a true line.
Um, but I mean, you you can write it. You don't have to be the one doing it. Find someone who's maybe a better voice actor or a better rapper, and have them do it. I mean, people write
AI.
lyrics for rappers all the time. When I was in the comedy group in law school, my boss used to write lyrics for the local rappers. So they were acting, "Oh, I'm tough. I'm on the street." Those lines were written by a law school student from a stereotypical upper middle class white background. And these rappers, okay, maybe they had been on the street, a few of them, but they weren't tough guys. But they were acting like it because someone else wrote the lyrics.
Damn. No, I hadn't even thought of that. I could probably write some damn good lyrics. I could do that. No, because it's like I feel like I'm just so I feel like I'm a specific type of person, but in the sense that like I see other people like me all over the place around here, and I'm just like there needs to be something for us. For you know, like I said, Tom McDonald's and all those artists, they really help fill the void with that because there's a lot of that story that
Dude.
it just makes sense. Oh, here, you frozen? Should we try and film an outro just in case?
All right. I'm gonna have to get off in a few minutes, anyways, because I've got something after this now.
Okay. Well, for everyone out there, the weather is destroying everybody, including our technology, and we are glitching out. So we're going to cut it early for today. But we're going to get together back here soon, and we'll have another episode for you. So just remember, people are fucking idiots. Everything's going to be okay. Seize the moment, lower the temperature, and yeah, everybody take care.
Likewise, and remember to tell stories and to listen to stories.
Hell yeah. Peace and love, y'all.
They burning the country down with their progressiveness. It started with changing what gender is, then graduated to you're racist if you think that your life matters and your skin don't have melanin. They don't want peace, they want skeletons. They want men to pretend that they're feminine. They don't want an election, they got so offended by freedom that they just try killing the president. I used to think that the woke were misguided, but now I can see that they're evil. Twitter is angry that Trump isn't dead. You know who got shot? Innocent people. Thought y'all were tolerant, thought we were equals. I thought you valued how everyone feels. Then why are y'all celebrating an attempted assassination like you're part of Antifa? Thank God the left can't aim. Thank God the right don't riot. Welcome to the home of the brave. Freedom ain't afraid of violence. You wish you was dying? Bitch, you missed. Thank God the left can't aim. Why can't we just shoot straight? Y'all are going insane. Bitch, you missed. There's no one else you can blame. Tried to lock him up in a cage. Now you trying to kill what you hate. Bitch, you missed. Told us trust the science, but it never made sense to me. Why would we put all our trust in the enemy? Millions of people are hooked on amphetamines. They're making billions on untested remedies. Borders are open to people with felonies. Biden can't stop him, he don't have the energy. Y'all wanna kill the man trying to fight for a better tomorrow by making him Kennedy? I tried to give y'all a chance, like maybe the left isn't nuts. I was wrong, cause y'all are exactly as crazy as every conservative person I know said you were all along. Wanna protest? Go hard. Wanna burn flags? Go off. But y'all are so triggered that you're pulling triggers at presidents. Y'all the terrorists when you're armed. Thank God the left can't aim. Thank God the right don't riot. Welcome to the home of the brave. Freedom ain't afraid of violence. You wish you was dying? Bitch, you missed. Thank God the left can't aim. Why can't we just shoot straight? Y'all are going insane. Bitch, you missed. There's no one else you can blame. Tried to lock him up in a cage. Now you trying to kill what you hate.